Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a little different, something that lives inside you right now, something unsettling, beautiful, and deeply strange. We're talking about the biology you never asked to know about, the parasites that might be reading your brain chemistry, the way your body decides to eat itself when you're starving, the disturbing truth about what's growing in your eyelashes right now, and the fact that you're technically more bacterial cells than human ones. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video if you're ready for 3 hours of biological horror that somehow makes perfect bedtime material. And subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy falling asleep to the weird, the scientific, and the slightly disturbing. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us in the dark. Maybe tell me what keeps you awake at night, or if you're one of those people who can fall asleep to literally anything. I want to know. Now, get comfortable. Maybe adjust your pillow, pull that blanket up a little higher, dim the lights if you haven't already. Let that white noise or fan hum in the background, because tonight we're going to explore the unsettling machinery that keeps you alive, the biology your body does in secret, the processes you'd rather not think about but probably should, the things happening beneath your skin right this very moment while you're trying to drift off. Here's something to start with. Right now, as you're lying there, approximately 100 trillion microorganisms are living on and inside your body. That's not an exaggeration. 100 trillion. They're on your skin, in your gut, between your teeth, inside your lungs. You are not an individual. You're an ecosystem. A walking, breathing habitat for life forms that have their own agendas, their own survival strategies, their own bizarre little existences that have nothing to do with your conscious plans. And while you sleep tonight, those organisms don't rest. They keep working. Your gut bacteria are fermenting the food you ate hours ago, producing gases, synthesizing vitamins, sending chemical signals to your brain that influence your mood tomorrow. The mites living in your eyelash follicles are crawling across your face, mating, laying eggs, dying, decomposing. All of this happening while you're unconscious, while you're dreaming about something completely unrelated, while you think you're at peace. But it's not just the foreign organisms. Your own cells are doing disturbing things too. While you sleep, your brain is literally shrinking. Not in a bad way, but shrinking nonetheless. The spaces between your neurons expand by up to 60%, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flush through and wash away the metabolic waste that built up during the day. It's like your brain is taking itself to the car wash, squeezing out the toxic proteins, the cellular garbage, the debris of consciousness. And if you don't sleep, if you stay awake too long, those toxins accumulate, your brain starts to malfunction, hallucinations begin, your immune system weakens, your body begins to consume itself in ways that aren't healthy, aren't controlled. There's a reason sleep deprivation is used as torture. Your biology demands rest, and if you don't give it willingly, your body will eventually take it by force, shutting down systems until you have no choice but to collapse. So tonight, for the next 3 hours, we're going to walk through the disturbing biology that makes you, you. We'll talk about the parasites hijacking your behavior, the way your cells commit organized suicide to keep you healthy, the bacteria outnumbering your own DNA, and the inevitability of decay that's already begun. By the end, you'll either be deeply asleep, or you'll be lying there wondering why evolution made us this way. Why we're such messy, complicated, slightly horrifying biological machines. Either way, let's ease into tonight's journey together. Welcome to 3 hours of disturbing biology. Try not to think about the mites. Actually, on second thought, let's start with them. You're not alone right now. Even if you're lying in bed by yourself, door closed, lights off, nothing but silence and the glow of your screen, you are absolutely not alone. Because living on your face right now, at this very moment, are thousands of tiny, 8-legged creatures called Demodex mites. They're in your eyelash follicles, in your pores, crawling across your skin while you blink and breathe and try to fall asleep. Demodex mites are about 1/3 of a millimeter long, translucent, with stubby legs and elongated bodies that look like something from a microscopic nightmare. They live their entire lives on your face. They're born there, they eat there, they mate there, and they die there. And here's the part that makes your skin crawl. They don't have anuses. They can't excrete waste. So they just hold it inside their bodies their entire lives until they die and burst, releasing all that accumulated feces directly into your pores. Everyone has them. It doesn't matter how clean you are, how often you wash your face, how expensive your skincare routine is. By the time you reach adulthood, you almost certainly have Demodex mites. Studies suggest that up to 100% of adults over 60 have them, and the colonization starts young. Even teenagers have them, maybe not as many, but they're there, setting up residence, starting families in the microscopic caves of your hair follicles. They're most active at night. During the day, they stay hidden deep in your follicles, away from light. But when you turn off the lamps and close your eyes, they emerge. They crawl across your skin at a speed of about 8 to 16 millimeters per hour, slow, methodical, searching for mates or new follicles to colonize. Some nights, if you have a particularly robust mite population, dozens of them might be moving across your face at once. You can't feel them. They're too small, too light, but they're there. And Demodex mites are just the beginning. Let's talk about Toxoplasma gondii, a single-celled parasite that lives inside approximately 1/3 of all humans on Earth. That's over 2 billion people walking around right now with this organism living in their brain tissue, their muscles, their organs. And the disturbing part isn't just that it's there, it's what it does. Toxoplasma's life cycle is strange and specific. It can only reproduce sexually inside the intestines of cats. But to get there, it needs to infect prey animals first. Mice, rats, birds. So when Toxoplasma infects a rodent, it does something extraordinary and terrifying. It changes the rodent's behavior. Infected mice lose their natural fear of cat urine. In fact, they're attracted to it. They seek it out. They wander into areas where cats hunt, making themselves easy targets. The mouse gets eaten, the parasite reaches its final host, and the cycle continues. Now, here's where it gets personal. Toxoplasma infects humans too, usually from undercooked meat or contact with cat feces. And once it's inside you, it forms cysts in your brain that can last your entire life. Your immune system can't eliminate them. They just sit there, dormant but present, tiny pockets of foreign life embedded in your neural tissue. And the question researchers have been asking for decades is this: does it change our behavior too? The evidence is unsettling. Studies have found correlations between Toxoplasma infection and increased risk-taking behavior, slower reaction times, and even higher rates of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Some research suggests infected men become more aggressive and suspicious, while infected women become more outgoing and warm. The mechanisms aren't fully understood, But the parasite does produce an enzyme that increases dopamine production in the brain. It's literally altering your neurochemistry. Is toxoplasma controlling you the way it controls mice? Probably not in such an obvious way. You're not suddenly compelled to seek out cats. But the idea that a microscopic organism living in your brain might be subtly influencing your personality, your decisions, your mood, that's disturbing on a level that's hard to articulate. You like to think you're in control, that your thoughts are yours. But what if some of them aren't? What if that impulsive decision, that uncharacteristic mood swing, that moment of anxiety, what if it wasn't entirely you? And it's not just toxoplasma. There are other parasites, other organisms that have evolved to manipulate their hosts in deeply weird ways. The lancet liver fluke infects ants and forces them to climb to the tips of grass blades where they're more likely to be eaten by grazing animals. The hairworm infects grasshoppers and drives them to drown themselves in water so the worm can emerge and reproduce. Parasitic wasps inject their eggs into caterpillars, and when the larvae hatch, they eat the caterpillar from the inside out while it's still alive, still moving, essentially turned into a living nursery. Humans like to think we're separate from this kind of biological horror. We have medicine, hygiene, awareness, but we're not separate. We're part of the same ecosystem, subject to the same evolutionary pressures, vulnerable to the same strategies that parasites have been refining for millions of years. The only difference is we're big enough and smart enough to study what's happening to us. But that doesn't mean we can stop it. Right now, you're hosting dozens of species: bacteria, fungi, viruses, arthropods, possibly protozoan parasites. Some are harmless, some are beneficial, some are just there, neutral passengers in the ecosystem of your body. And some, like toxoplasma, like Demodex, are doing things you'd rather not think about. They're eating, reproducing, dying, influencing. They're living their lives on and inside you, completely indifferent to your preferences, your comfort, your sense of self. You wash your face, you take your vitamins, you try to be healthy, but you can't evict them. They're part of the deal of being a biological organism on this planet. You are not a closed system. You are porous, colonized, shared. Your body is a habitat, and habitats are never empty. So tonight, as you lie there trying to sleep, just remember, you're not alone. You've never been alone. And the mites, they're already awake. But if tiny parasites living on your face disturb you, wait until we talk about what your own body does to itself when it gets hungry enough. Your body is eating itself right now, not in a destructive, disease-ridden way, in a carefully controlled, absolutely necessary way. It's called autophagy, which literally translates from Greek as self-eating, and it's happening in your cells at this very moment, a process of selective cannibalism that keeps you alive, keeps you functioning, keeps you from drowning in your own cellular garbage. Here's how it works. Inside each of your cells are thousands of tiny structures: proteins, organelles, bits of membrane, molecular machines that do the work of living. But these structures don't last forever. Proteins get damaged. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of your cells, wear out and become inefficient. Bits of cellular debris accumulate like trash in an apartment where no one ever takes out the garbage. And if that garbage isn't removed, it becomes toxic. It interferes with normal cell function. It can trigger disease, accelerate aging, even cause cell death. So, your cells have a solution. They eat themselves. They take the damaged parts, the worn-out organelles, the misfolded proteins, and they wrap them up in a membrane structure called an autophagosome. Think of it as a tiny garbage bag made of lipids. This autophagosome then fuses with a lysosome, which is essentially a sack of digestive enzymes, highly acidic, capable of breaking down almost anything biological. The contents get digested, broken down into their basic components, amino acids, lipids, sugars, and then those components get recycled, used to build new proteins, generate energy, keep the cell running. It's elegant, it's efficient, and it's absolutely essential. Without autophagy, you would die. Your cells would choke on their own waste, accumulate damage faster than they could repair it, and eventually stop functioning altogether. In fact, defects in autophagy are linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, to cancer, to premature aging. When autophagy breaks down, so do you. But here's where it gets more disturbing. Autophagy doesn't just clean up cellular trash. It's also your body's emergency food supply. When you're starving, when you haven't eaten in hours or days, when your blood sugar drops and your glycogen stores are depleted, your body needs fuel. And it finds that fuel by cannibalizing itself more aggressively. It starts breaking down larger structures, not just damaged ones. Ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, even parts of the cytoplasm get packaged up and digested. In extreme starvation, autophagy ramps up dramatically. Your body becomes ruthlessly efficient at recycling itself. It breaks down muscle tissue to free up amino acids. It digests fat stores, then proteins, then anything it can find. Autophagy keeps your most essential cells, your brain cells, your heart cells, fed for as long as possible by sacrificing less critical tissues. It's survival cannibalism at the cellular level. Your body making the decision. We can lose this muscle, this fat, this organ tissue, as long as we keep the brain alive. Studies on fasting and caloric restriction have shown that autophagy increases significantly when you stop eating. After about 12 to 16 hours without food, autophagy activity starts to rise. By 24 to 48 hours, it's in high gear. Some researchers believe this is one of the reasons intermittent fasting might have health benefits. By triggering autophagy regularly, you're forcing your cells to clean house, to get rid of accumulated damage, to become more efficient. It's like a controlled reset, a way of making your cells young again, at least temporarily. But there's a dark side. Cancer cells also use autophagy. When a tumor is growing rapidly, it needs enormous amounts of nutrients and energy. And if those nutrients aren't readily available from the bloodstream, cancer cells turn to autophagy. They eat themselves to fuel their own growth, recycling their internal components to keep dividing, keep spreading. In some cases, this makes cancer cells more resilient, harder to kill. Chemotherapy might starve them of external nutrients, but they just switch to autophagy and keep going. This has led to a complicated relationship between autophagy and cancer treatment. Some researchers are exploring drugs that inhibit autophagy, hoping to starve cancer cells that have become dependent on self-eating. Others are looking at drugs that enhance autophagy, based on evidence that it can prevent cancer from developing in the first place by clearing out damaged cellular components before they turn malignant. It's a paradox. Autophagy can protect you from cancer, but it can also help cancer survive once it's established. And then there's the question of what happens when autophagy goes too far. Because yes, there is such a thing as too much self-eating. In certain diseases, in certain stress conditions, cells can trigger excessive autophagy and essentially digest themselves to death. It's called autophagic cell death, and it's distinct from apoptosis, the more well-known form of programmed cell suicide. In autophagic cell death, the cell doesn't just trigger its own dismantling. It consumes itself from the inside, breaking down so much of its own structure that it can no longer function and collapses. This can happen in heart tissue after a heart attack, in brain tissue after a stroke, in muscle tissue under extreme stress. The cells, damaged and struggling, ramp up autophagy in an attempt to survive, but they cross a threshold. They eat too much of themselves, they pass the point of no return, and they die, not from external attack, but from internal consumption. So here you are, lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and inside you, in every cell of your body, this process is happening. Membranes are forming around damaged proteins, lysosomes are fusing, releasing their caustic enzymes, cellular structures are being dissolved, broken down, recycled. Your body is eating itself in thousands of microscopic acts of controlled destruction. It's keeping you alive by constantly consuming parts of you, deciding what to keep and what to digest, what's worth saving and what's expendable. You can't feel it, you can't sense it, but it's there, humming along beneath your consciousness, a process older than complex life itself. Even single-celled organisms do this. Autophagy has been around for billions of years, refined by evolution into one of the most fundamental survival mechanisms in biology. It's why you can fast and not immediately die. It's why your cells don't suffocate in their own waste. It's why you're able to heal, to adapt, to survive periods of stress and scarcity. But it's also a reminder that your body is not a static thing. You are not a fixed entity. You're a process, a continuous recycling operation, a biological system that maintains itself by constantly tearing down and rebuilding. The you that exists right now is not the same you that existed a year ago, not just mentally, but physically. Your cells have eaten themselves and rebuilt themselves countless times. You are, in a very literal sense, made from your own remains. So tonight, as autophagy does its quiet work, as your cells package up their garbage and digest it in their acidic compartments, remember, you are always being remade, always being consumed and reformed. It's beautiful in a way, and deeply, deeply strange, but at least you're doing it to yourself. The real question is, what about all those other organisms living inside you, the ones that aren't you at all? Let's talk about the fact that you're outnumbered in your own body. You like to think of yourself as a singular being, one person, one body, one set of DNA, but here's the uncomfortable truth. You are vastly outnumbered. For every single human cell in your body, there are roughly equal numbers of bacterial cells. Some estimates put it at a 1-to-1 ratio. Others suggest slightly more human cells, but either way, you're essentially a walking ecosystem, a colony, a cooperative venture between human tissue and trillions of microscopic organisms that have their own genetic blueprints, their own evolutionary histories, their own survival strategies. The human microbiome, as it's called, is staggering in its scale and complexity. Your gut alone contains somewhere between 30 to 40 trillion bacterial cells, representing thousands of different species. That's more bacteria in your intestines than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And these aren't passive passengers. They're active participants in your biology, influencing digestion, immunity, metabolism, even your brain chemistry and mood. Let's start with the basics. Most of these bacteria live in your large intestine, packed into a dense, writhing community that weighs somewhere between 1 and 2 kilograms. That's roughly the weight of your brain. You're carrying around a second organ made entirely of foreign organisms. They feed on the food you eat, the fiber and nutrients that your own cells can't fully digest. In return, they produce vitamins like vitamin K and certain B vitamins. They break down complex carbohydrates into short-chain fatty acids that your intestinal cells use for energy. They train your immune system, teaching it to distinguish between harmless microbes and dangerous pathogens. Without your gut bacteria, you would be severely malnourished, immunocompromised, and unable to properly process much of what you eat. Babies born via caesarean section, who miss out on the initial bacterial transfer that happens during vaginal birth, have different microbiome compositions than babies born naturally, and those differences can persist for years, potentially affecting immune development, allergies, even obesity risk later in life. Your microbiome starts forming the moment you're born, and it continues to evolve throughout your entire life. But here's where it gets strange. Your gut bacteria don't just affect your digestion, they affect your brain. The gut and the brain are connected by the vagus nerve, a massive information highway that runs from your brainstem down through your chest and into your abdomen. And the bacteria in your gut are constantly sending signals up this nerve, chemical messages that influence neurotransmitter production, stress responses, even behavior. Studies in mice have shown this in dramatic ways. When researchers take anxious mice and give them fecal transplants from calm mice, the anxious mice become calmer. When they do the reverse, calm mice become more anxious. The bacteria are literally transferring behavioral traits. And while humans are more complex than mice, the evidence is mounting that our microbiomes influence our mental states too. People with depression often have different gut bacteria compositions than people without depression. The same is true for anxiety disorders, autism spectrum disorders, and even neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. The mechanism seems to involve neurotransmitters. Certain gut bacteria produce gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, the one that calms neural activity and reduces anxiety. Other bacteria produce serotonin or influence its production. In fact, about 90 to 95% of your body's serotonin is produced in your gut, not in your brain. That's right. The neurotransmitter most associated with mood, with happiness and well-being, is mostly manufactured in your intestines by cells that are influenced by your microbiome. So when you feel anxious, when you feel depressed, when you lie awake at night with your mind racing and your stomach in knots, there's a real possibility that your gut bacteria are part of the equation. They might be producing inflammatory compounds that travel through your bloodstream and affect your brain. They might be failing to produce enough of the beneficial metabolites that keep your nervous system balanced. Your mental state might not just be in your head. It might be in your intestines. This has led to an explosion of research into probiotics, prebiotics, and fecal microbiota transplants. Yes, fecal transplants. It's exactly what it sounds like. Doctors take stool from a healthy donor, process it, and transplant it into a patient's colon, usually to treat severe infections like Clostridioides difficile, a dangerous bacterium that causes life-threatening diarrhea, and it works remarkably well. Success rates are often above 90%. You're essentially rebooting someone's gut ecosystem by introducing a healthy bacterial community. But researchers are now exploring whether fecal transplants could treat other conditions: obesity, inflammatory bowel disease, even depression and anxiety. Early results are mixed but intriguing. Some patients report dramatic improvements in mood after receiving transplants. Others see no change. The science is still young, still trying to understand which bacterial species do what, how they interact, why some people respond and others don't. What's clear is that your microbiome is not static. It changes based on what you eat, where you live, what medications you take, how much stress you're under, how much sleep you get. Antibiotics can devastate your gut bacteria, wiping out beneficial species along with harmful ones. A high-fiber diet feeds the bacteria that produce anti-inflammatory compounds. A diet high in processed foods and sugar tends to favor bacteria associated with inflammation and metabolic problems. You are, in a very real sense, gardening your gut every time you eat. And it's not just your gut. Your skin has its own microbiome, your mouth has another, your lungs, your urogenital tract. Every surface of your body that's exposed to the environment is colonized by bacteria and fungi, each region with its own characteristic community. You're not a single organism. You're a complex federation of species living in relative harmony most of the time. But sometimes that harmony breaks down. When the balance shifts, when pathogenic bacteria overgrow or beneficial ones decline, you get dysbiosis, an imbalanced microbiome. And dysbiosis is linked to an astonishing range of conditions: irritable bowel syndrome, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disorders, allergies, asthma, even some cancers. The microbiome is now understood to be so fundamental to health that some scientists call it a hidden organ, as important as your liver or kidneys, but made of foreign cells. Think about that for a moment. You're lying there trying to sleep, and inside you, trillions of bacteria are digesting your dinner, producing gases that make you bloated, synthesizing vitamins, sending chemical signals to your brain that might be making you feel calm or anxious, or somewhere in between. They're competing with each other for resources, forming biofilms on your intestinal walls, reproducing every 20 minutes in some cases, dying and being replaced, evolving in real time. It's a microscopic civilization living inside you, and you have only limited control over it. You can influence it with diet and lifestyle, but you can't command it. You can't will your gut bacteria to behave differently. They're not you. They have their own interests, their own evolutionary pressures. And yet, your health and theirs are so intertwined that it's almost impossible to separate them. You are not just a human. You are a holobiont, a composite organism, human cells, and bacterial cells functioning as a single biological unit. So when you think about who you are, remember that you is plural. You are many, and most of you isn't even human. But at least these bacteria are alive, actively metabolizing, interacting with your cells. What happens when they stop? What happens to all that bacterial biomass when the human host dies? Let's talk about decomposition. The moment your heart stops beating, the moment your lungs take their last breath, and your brain activity flatlines, something immediate begins to happen. Your body doesn't wait. It doesn't pause respectfully. It starts breaking down within minutes, beginning a process that's as inevitable as it is disturbing. Decomposition isn't something that happens to you after death. It's something your own body does to itself, using many of the same mechanisms that kept you alive. Within 4 to 6 minutes of death, your cells begin to die from lack of oxygen. Without your heart pumping blood, oxygen delivery stops. And without oxygen, your cells can't produce energy. The first to go are your brain cells, the most sensitive to oxygen deprivation. Then your liver cells, your kidney cells, your muscle cells. Each one shuts down its energy production, its metabolic processes grinding to a halt. But shutting down isn't the same as disappearing. The cells are still there, full of enzymes, full of proteins, full of structures that are about to turn against themselves. This is called autolysis, self-digestion, and it's different from the controlled autophagy we talked about earlier. This isn't careful cellular housekeeping. This is chaos. When your cells die, their membranes break down. The lysosomes, those little sacs of digestive enzymes we mentioned before, rupture and spill their contents into the cell. Those enzymes start breaking down everything they touch: proteins, lipids, DNA, the entire cellular machinery. The cell essentially digests itself from the inside out. And this happens everywhere in your body simultaneously. Your stomach and intestines, which spent your entire life digesting food, now turn their enzymes on themselves. The acidic environment and powerful digestive proteins that broke down your meals start breaking down your own tissue. Your pancreas, which produced enzymes to digest proteins and fats, begins digesting itself. This is why these organs are often among the first to show signs of decomposition. They're eating themselves with their own tools. Within an hour or two, another process begins. Livor mortis, the settling of blood. Gravity pulls your blood down to the lowest parts of your body, pooling in the capillaries and small vessels. This creates a purplish-red discoloration on the underside of the body. If you're lying on your back, it appears on your back, your buttocks, the backs of your legs. If you're on your side, it appears there. This pooling is why forensic investigators can sometimes tell if a body has been moved after death. The lividity pattern doesn't match the position the body was found in. Around the same time, rigor mortis sets in. Your muscles stiffen, lock into place. This happens because of calcium. When you're alive, your muscle cells carefully regulate calcium levels. Calcium floods in to trigger contraction, then gets pumped back out to allow relaxation. But when your cells die and their membranes fail, calcium leaks in uncontrollably. Your muscles contract and can't relax. They stay contracted, rigid, until the muscle proteins themselves start to break down, usually after 24 to 48 hours. Then the body goes limp again. But the real architects of decomposition aren't your own cells, they're the bacteria. The same trillions of microorganisms that lived peacefully in your gut while you were alive. The moment you die, the rules change. Your immune system shuts down. The barriers that kept gut bacteria confined to your intestines start to break down, and those bacteria, no longer held in check, begin to spread. They move through your circulatory system, through your lymphatic system, spreading into tissues that were sterile during life. They colonize your liver, your spleen, your brain, and as they spread, they multiply explosively. They're feeding on you now, breaking down your tissues with their enzymes, producing gases as metabolic byproducts. This is called putrefaction, and it's when decomposition becomes visible and, frankly, grotesque. The gases produced by bacteria, hydrogen sulfide, methane, cadaverine, putrescine, start to accumulate. Your abdomen swells as your intestines fill with gas. The pressure can become so intense that it forces fluids out of your body through your mouth, your nose, other orifices. Your skin takes on a greenish tint, starting in the lower right abdomen where your cecum, part of your large intestine dense with bacteria is located. This green discoloration spreads across your body as the bacteria continue their work, breaking down hemoglobin in your blood, producing sulfhemoglobin, which is green. Your eyes, those windows to the soul, cloud over. The corneas dry out and become opaque. Your tongue can swell and protrude. Blisters form on your skin as the outer layers separate from the deeper layers, filled with the fluid and gas of decomposition. Your body is transforming, losing the shape and features that made you recognizable, becoming something else entirely. And then the insects arrive. Blowflies can detect a dead body within minutes of death, sometimes even before. They're attracted by the gases, the specific chemical signature of decay. They lay eggs, hundreds of them, in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, any opening they can find. Within 24 hours, those eggs hatch into maggots, and maggots are extraordinarily efficient decomposers. They consume soft tissue rapidly, liquefying it with their enzymes and feeding voraciously. A body can be reduced to bone by insects in as little as 2 weeks under the right conditions. Forensic entomologists use insect succession patterns to estimate time of death. First come the blowflies, then flesh flies, then beetles that feed on drier tissue. Each species has a predictable timeline, a schedule of arrival and departure that corresponds to the stage of decomposition. It's morbid, but it's also fascinating. Even in death, your body follows rules, patterns that can be studied and predicted. But decomposition doesn't always follow the same path. It depends on environment. In hot, humid conditions, decomposition accelerates dramatically. Bacteria thrive, insects are more active, tissues break down in days. In cold environments, decomposition slows. Bodies can be preserved for weeks or months if the temperature is low enough. In water, decomposition follows different patterns. Adipocere, a waxy substance also called grave wax, can form when body fats react with water and bacteria in the absence of oxygen. It preserves the body's shape, sometimes for years, creating a soap-like coating over the skin. In very dry environments, bodies can mummify naturally. The tissues dry out before bacteria can fully colonize them. The skin becomes leathery, stretched tight over bones. Internal organs shrink but don't liquefy. Some naturally mummified bodies have been found in deserts or dry caves, preserved for centuries, looking almost alive but hollow, desiccated, frozen in time. And eventually, given enough time, everything organic breaks down. The soft tissues go first, then the organs, then the skin and muscles. What remains are bones and teeth, the hardest, most durable parts of your body. But even bones decompose eventually. They become brittle, porous, weathered by the elements. Scavengers scatter them. Bacteria and fungi colonize them, slowly breaking down the minerals. Given decades or centuries, even bones return to the soil. This is the final truth of biology. Everything that lives must die, and everything that dies must decompose. Your body, this intricate machine that you've inhabited your entire life, is not a permanent structure. It's a temporary arrangement of molecules held together by energy and chemistry and constant maintenance. And when that maintenance stops, entropy takes over. The universe wants chaos, and your body, without life to resist it, gives in. The bacteria that helped you digest food, that produced vitamins, that protected you from pathogens, they don't mourn your passing. They simply continue doing what they've always done. breaking down organic matter, recycling nutrients, returning your atoms to the ecosystem. You become food for them, then food for insects, then nutrients for soil, then eventually part of plants, part of other animals, part of the endless cycle of matter and energy that defines life on this planet. So as you lie there tonight, very much alive, your heart beating steadily, your lungs filling and emptying, your bacteria contained and cooperative, remember that this body is temporary. It's incredibly complex, yes. Resilient, yes. But also fragile and finite. Decomposition isn't something that happens only after death. In a way, it's happening right now, very slowly, one damaged cell at a time. Your body is always balancing creation and destruction, building and breaking down, living and dying simultaneously. But of course, before any of that, before death, there's birth. And birth has its own disturbing biology. Before you were you, before you had thoughts or memories or any sense of self, you were a cluster of cells, not even recognizably human yet. Just a tiny collection of dividing cells, following ancient genetic instructions, building a body from scratch. And if you could have seen yourself in those early weeks, you might not have recognized what you were looking at. Because human development doesn't start with a miniature human, it starts with something far stranger. At around 4 weeks after conception, a human embryo is about the size of a poppy seed, and at this stage, it has something deeply unsettling, gill-like structures. Not functional gills, but pharyngeal arches, folds of tissue in the neck region that look remarkably similar to the gill slits found in fish embryos. This isn't a coincidence. It's evidence of our evolutionary history, written directly into our development. Those structures will eventually become parts of your jaw, your inner ear, your throat. But for a brief window, every human embryo has these fish-like features. And that's not all. At around 5 to 6 weeks, human embryos have tails. Actual tails, extensions of the developing spine that protrude from the lower back. Most of the time, this tail regresses. The cells undergo apoptosis, programmed cell death, and the tail is reabsorbed into the body, leaving only your coccyx, your tailbone, as a remnant. But occasionally, very rarely, babies are born with vestigial tails still attached. Soft, boneless extensions that have to be surgically removed. It's a reminder that development is a process of modification, of building on ancient body plans, and sometimes those modifications don't complete as expected. Early embryonic development is a cascade of precisely timed events. Cells divide, migrate, differentiate into specific tissue types. A group of cells that was identical yesterday suddenly splits into groups with different destinies. Some become nerve cells, some become muscle, some become bone. The instructions are all in the DNA, but the execution depends on chemical signals, on mechanical forces, on cells communicating with their neighbors and responding to their environment. And here's something that sounds like science fiction, but is absolutely real. Sometimes, in the very early stages of development, there are 2 embryos, twins, fraternal or identical, 2 separate clusters of cells, 2 potential people. But then, one of them stops developing. One embryo is absorbed by the other, its cells incorporated into its sibling's growing body. This is called vanishing twin syndrome, and it happens in an estimated 10 to 15% of pregnancies that start as multiples. Most of the time, the absorbed twin leaves no trace, but sometimes cells from that vanished sibling persist. They become part of the surviving twin's body, carrying different DNA, living as a hidden population of foreign cells. This is a form of chimerism, named after the Greek monster that was part lion, part goat, part serpent. A chimeric person is essentially two individuals merged into one body, and they might never know unless genetic testing reveals cells with two distinct DNA profiles. But chimerism doesn't only happen through vanishing twins. It can also happen during pregnancy in a different way. Fetal cells cross the placenta into the mother's bloodstream, and they don't just visit, they stay. They integrate into her tissues and can persist for decades after the pregnancy ends. This is called fetal microchimerism, and studies have found fetal cells in mothers' brains, hearts, kidneys, skin, even decades after giving birth. What are these cells doing? No one knows for certain. Some research suggests they might help with tissue repair, migrating to sites of injury and participating in healing. Other studies have found associations between fetal microchimerism and autoimmune diseases, suggesting the foreign cells might sometimes trigger immune responses. It's possible that carrying your children's cells for the rest of your life is a biological bond that goes deeper than anyone realized. You are not just your own cells. If you've ever been pregnant, you are still, on a cellular level, part of your child, and they are part of you. And then there are teratomas, tumors that form from germ cells, the cells that would normally become eggs or sperm. Teratomas are bizarre even by tumor standards because they can contain multiple tissue types: hair, teeth, bone, even partially formed organs. There are documented cases of teratomas containing eyes, brain tissue, fragments of intestine. These are not organs that develop normally. They're chaotic, disorganized growths where cells differentiated without the usual developmental constraints. A teratoma is essentially a failed attempt at creating a body, a scrambled developmental program producing tissue in all the wrong places. Most teratomas are benign, surgically removable, and don't recur, but they're unsettling because they reveal how much of your body's development depends on precise control. Every cell in your body has the genetic instructions to become almost any tissue type. What keeps your liver cells from suddenly growing teeth? What keeps your skin cells from trying to become brain tissue? It's layers of regulation, chemical signals that tell cells what to become and when to stop. And when that regulation fails, you get growths like teratomas, glimpses of what happens when development goes rogue. Even normal fetal development has its disturbing moments. The formation of fingers and toes, for instance, starts with paddle-like limb buds. Your hands and feet begin as solid flaps of tissue. The individual digits only emerge because the cells between them die on schedule. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, sculpts your fingers by killing the webbing between them. If that cell death doesn't happen properly, babies can be born with syndactyly fused fingers or toes, webbed hands or feet. Your hands are shaped by death as much as by growth. And throughout development, cells are constantly dying, massive numbers of them. Your nervous system, for example, produces far more neurons than you'll ever need. During fetal development and early infancy, about half of all neurons die. This isn't a defect, it's deliberate pruning. The brain overproduces neurons, then kills off the ones that don't make useful connections, refining the neural network through selective death. It's brutal efficiency. Build more than you need, then eliminate the weak or unnecessary. Your brain is sculpted by neuronal genocide. Even the heart, that symbol of life and vitality, starts as a simple tube that twists and folds into the four-chambered structure you rely on now. If that twisting happens incorrectly, you get congenital heart defects, some mild, some incompatible with life. The heart's development is so complex, so dependent on precise timing and positioning, that it's almost miraculous it works as often as it does. About 1 in every 100 babies is born with some form of heart defect, a reminder that development is not a guarantee. And all of this, all of these bizarre stages and processes and prunings and deaths and transformations happened to you. You went through a phase where you had structures that looked like gills, you had a tail, your fingers were carved out of solid tissue by programmed cell death. You might be carrying cells from a twin who never made it, or your mother might be carrying your cells in her body right now. You are the product of an almost incomprehensibly complex developmental program that somehow, against enormous odds, produced a functional human being. So as you lie there tonight, in the body you've always known, remember that this body has a history. It didn't appear fully formed. It was built cell by cell, tissue by tissue, through a process that was part construction, part destruction, part evolutionary throwback, part delicate improvisation. You are the result of millions of years of evolutionary trial and error, encoded in your genes and expressed in your development. And the fact that you exist at all, whole and functional, is both a biological marvel and a reminder of how easily it all could have gone differently. But once you're built, once you've made it through development and birth and childhood, you're safe, right? Not exactly. Because sometimes your own cells forget the rules and start building something they shouldn't. Let's talk about cancer. Cancer is not an invader. It's not a virus that sneaks in from outside, not a bacterium that colonizes your tissues. Cancer is you. It's your own cells, your own DNA, gone rogue. It's a civil war at the cellular level, where parts of your body stop following the rules and start pursuing their own agenda, endless growth, unlimited division, survival at any cost. And the truly disturbing part is that your body creates cancer cells all the time. Right now, as you lie here, cells in your body are mutating, making copying errors, accumulating damage. Most of the time, your immune system catches them, but sometimes it doesn't. Here's how it starts. Every time a cell divides, it has to copy its entire genome, about 3 billion base pairs of DNA. That's an enormous amount of information to replicate perfectly, and mistakes happen. Most of these mistakes are harmless, landing in parts of the genome that don't code for anything important. But occasionally, a mutation hits a critical gene, one that controls cell division, one that tells the cell when to grow and when to stop. And if the right combination of mutations accumulates in the same cell, it transforms. It stops listening to the signals that normally keep cell growth in check. Normal cells are team players. They divide when the body needs them to, when tissue is damaged and needs repair, when growth is required, and then they stop. They differentiate into specialized cells, liver cells, skin cells, neurons, whatever their tissue type demands. And eventually, they die, either through apoptosis, programmed cell death, or through senescence, where they stop dividing and just sit there until they're cleared away. This is how it's supposed to work. Controlled growth, controlled death, the whole system in balance. Cancer cells break this system. They acquire mutations that disable the brakes on cell division. Genes like tumor protein p53, which normally detects DNA damage and either repairs it or triggers cell death, get mutated and stop working. Other genes that promote growth, proto-oncogenes, get mutated into oncogenes that are always active. always telling the cell to divide. The cell becomes immortal in a sense. It forgets how to die. It just keeps dividing, over and over, ignoring every signal from the body telling it to stop. And this is where things get truly disturbing. A single cancer cell, dividing unchecked, can produce a tumor containing billions of cells. It grows exponentially. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. By the time a tumor is large enough to detect, about 1 centimeter across, it already contains roughly 1 billion cells. That's a billion descendants of that original rogue cell, all carrying the same mutations, all ignoring the same rules. But a tumor can't grow indefinitely without resources. It needs oxygen, it needs nutrients, it needs blood supply. And so cancer cells do something remarkable and terrifying. They hijack your body's own systems to support their growth. They secrete chemical signals called growth factors that stimulate angiogenesis, the formation of new blood vessels. These vessels grow into the tumor, feeding it, allowing it to expand beyond the size it could reach on diffused oxygen alone. The tumor is essentially building its own infrastructure, creating a supply network to fuel its expansion. And then comes metastasis, the process that makes cancer truly deadly. Cancer cells begin to break away from the primary tumor. They invade surrounding tissue, push through the walls of blood vessels or lymphatic vessels, and enter the circulation. They travel through your bloodstream like seeds scattered by wind, landing in distant organs: the lungs, the liver, the bones, the brain. Most of these circulating tumor cells die. The journey is harsh, the immune system is hunting them, and finding a hospitable new site is difficult. But some survive. They lodge in a new tissue, begin dividing again, and form secondary tumors, metastases. This is what kills most cancer patients. Not the primary tumor, but the metastases. A tumor in one location can often be removed surgically, treated with focused radiation. But once cancer has spread to multiple organs, once it's systemic, treatment becomes exponentially harder. You're not fighting one tumor anymore. You're fighting dozens, hundreds, each one potentially developing new mutations, new resistances to treatment. And here's the paradox. Cancer cells are simultaneously more fragile and more resilient than normal cells. They're fragile because they're growing so fast, dividing so frequently, that they're constantly on the edge of crisis. They accumulate DNA damage faster than normal cells. They're more susceptible to stress, to lack of nutrients, to disruptions in their energy supply. This is why chemotherapy works. Most chemotherapy drugs target rapidly dividing cells, exploiting the fact that cancer cells divide much more frequently than most normal cells. But cancer cells are also resilient because they evolve. Tumors are not uniform populations. They're diverse ecosystems of cells with different mutations, different characteristics. When you treat cancer with chemotherapy or radiation, you're applying selective pressure. The treatment kills the vulnerable cells, but the resistant ones survive. And those survivors divide, and their descendants inherit that resistance. The tumor evolves, becomes harder to kill. This is why cancer can return after treatment, sometimes years later, more aggressive and more resistant than before. Your immune system is supposed to prevent this. You have specialized cells, natural killer cells, and cytotoxic T cells that patrol your body looking for abnormal cells, and they do find cancer cells. They recognize markers on the cancer cell surface that signal something is wrong, and they destroy them. This is called immunosurveillance, and it's happening constantly. You've probably had cells that were on their way to becoming cancer, and your immune system eliminated them before they became a problem. You never knew. It happened silently, efficiently, in the background of your biology. But cancer cells evolve to evade the immune system too. They can downregulate the surface markers that immune cells use to identify them. They can secrete signals that suppress immune activity, creating a protective microenvironment around the tumor. They can even recruit regulatory T cells, immune cells that normally prevent autoimmune reactions, and use them to shield the tumor from attack. The cancer is not just growing, it's actively defending itself against your body's attempts to destroy it. Some cancers are more aggressive than others. Pancreatic cancer, glioblastoma, small cell lung cancer. These tend to grow rapidly, metastasize early, and resist treatment. Others, like certain prostate cancers or thyroid cancers, can grow so slowly that they might never cause problems in a person's lifetime. Some people die with cancer, not from cancer, carrying small tumors that were never detected and never became dangerous. The disease is not a single entity. It's thousands of different diseases, each with its own biology, its own behavior, its own prognosis. And the truly unsettling reality is that cancer is, in some ways, inevitable. The longer you live, the more cell divisions your body undergoes, the more opportunities there are for mutations to accumulate. Age is the single biggest risk factor for most cancers. By the time you reach 80, your lifetime risk of developing cancer is somewhere around 40 to 50%. It's not a failure of your body. It's a consequence of being a multicellular organism that relies on cell division to maintain itself. Every division is a roll of the dice. Most of the time, nothing goes wrong, but eventually, odds catch up. So, as you lie here tonight, cells in your body are dividing. Most of them are doing it correctly, following the rules, contributing to your health and maintenance. But statistically, some of them are making mistakes, small mutations, minor errors. Your immune system is patrolling, catching the problems, destroying the cells that look abnormal. It's a constant background process, a war you're not aware of, fought at the microscopic level. And most of the time, you win. But cancer is a reminder that your body is not a perfect machine. It's a biological system subject to entropy, to randomness, to the slow accumulation of damage over time. But at least cancer is driven by internal mutation, by your own cells going wrong. There are other things your body does that are just as disturbing, like what happens when you stop eating entirely. Let's talk about starvation. Your body is always making calculations. How much energy do I have? How much do I need? What can I sacrifice if food doesn't come? These calculations happen beneath your awareness, driven by hormones and neural circuits that have been refined over millions of years of evolution. Because for most of human history, food was not guaranteed. Starvation was a real and constant threat. And so your body developed elaborate mechanisms to survive it, mechanisms that are still active in you right now, even if you've never missed a meal in your life. It starts with hunger. When your stomach is empty, when your blood sugar drops, cells in your stomach and intestines release a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin travels through your bloodstream to your brain, specifically to the hypothalamus, a small region that controls appetite and energy balance. Ghrelin binds to receptors there and triggers a cascade of signals. You feel hungry, you start thinking about food. Your body reduces energy expenditure to conserve what you have. This is normal. This happens every few hours when you haven't eaten. But if you don't eat, if hours turn into a day, then days, the signals change. Your body shifts into a different metabolic mode. First, it burns through your glycogen stores, chains of glucose molecules stored in your liver and muscles. You have enough glycogen to last maybe 12 to 24 hours, depending on your activity level. Once that's depleted, your body needs another fuel source, and it finds one: fat. Your adipose tissue, your fat stores, begins breaking down. Triglycerides are split into glycerol and fatty acids. The fatty acids are released into your bloodstream and transported to your liver, where they're converted into ketone bodies. Ketones can cross the blood-brain barrier and serve as fuel for your brain, which normally runs almost exclusively on glucose. This metabolic switch, from burning glucose to burning fat and producing ketones, is called ketosis, and it's your body's way of accessing its long-term energy reserves. For the first few days of fasting, this works well. You feel hungry, yes, but your body is efficiently burning fat. Some people even report feeling mentally sharper in ketosis, possibly because ketones are a very clean-burning fuel for the brain, producing fewer metabolic byproducts than glucose. But if starvation continues, if days turn into weeks, your body faces a problem. Fat stores are finite, and more critically, fat can't provide everything your body needs. You need protein for immune function, for maintaining muscle, for countless enzymatic processes. And if you're not eating protein, your body has only one source: itself. This is when muscle wasting begins. Your body starts breaking down skeletal muscle tissue to free up amino acids. These amino acids are transported to the liver, where they're converted into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis, literally making new glucose. This glucose feeds your brain and other tissues that can't run entirely on ketones, but this comes at a cost. You're losing muscle mass, losing strength, losing the functional tissue that allows you to move, to hunt, to escape danger. Evolution balanced this carefully. Your body tries to spare muscle for as long as possible, burning fat preferentially, but eventually there's no choice. The Minnesota starvation experiment, conducted during World War II, documented this in brutal detail. 36 conscientious objectors volunteered to be semi-starved for 6 months to help researchers understand how to rehabilitate starvation victims in war-torn Europe. They were fed about 1,500 calories per day, roughly half of what they needed. They lost an average of 25% of their body weight, but the physical changes were only part of the story. Psychologically, the men became obsessed with food. They thought about it constantly, dreamed about it, collected recipes, talked endlessly about meals they would eat after the experiment ended. Their personalities changed. They became irritable, depressed, apathetic. Their libido vanished entirely. Some experienced extreme emotional swings. One participant cut off 3 of his own fingers with an axe, possibly a self-inflicted injury to escape the experiment, though he claimed it was an accident. The mind, deprived of adequate nutrition, begins to break down just like the body. And there's a reason for this psychological obsession. Your brain is trying to motivate you to find food. Hunger becomes all-consuming because, from an evolutionary perspective, it should be. If you're starving, nothing else matters. Not social status, not long-term plans, not anything except finding your next meal. This is why starvation is such an effective form of torture and control. It reduces a person to their most basic drive, survival. But let's say starvation continues even further. Weeks become months. Your body has burned through most of its fat. It's been breaking down muscle, but it tries to protect vital organs for as long as possible. Your heart muscle, your diaphragm, the muscles you need to breathe and pump blood, these are spared until the very end, but other organs start to shrink. Your liver shrinks, your intestines shrink, your brain actually loses mass. You become weak, lethargic, unable to maintain body temperature. Your immune system shuts down. You become vulnerable to infections that your body would normally fight off easily. And then there's the hair. In prolonged starvation, your body stops investing energy in non-essential processes. Hair growth stops. Existing hair becomes brittle and falls out. But strangely, some starvation victims develop lanugo, a fine, downy hair that covers the body. This is the same type of hair that covers fetuses in the womb. Why does it appear during starvation? Possibly for insulation. When you've lost most of your fat, which normally insulates you, your body tries to compensate. It's a desperate, inefficient measure, but your body is trying everything it can to survive. Eventually, if no food comes, you reach the final stage. Your body has exhausted its fat stores, sacrificed muscle mass, shrunk its organs. The only reserves left are proteins in vital organs, and when your body starts breaking down heart muscle, liver tissue, the proteins essential for survival, death becomes imminent. The cause is usually organ failure or infection. Your heart becomes too weak to pump effectively. Your immune system can't fight off even minor infections. Pneumonia, once easily survivable, becomes lethal. But here's something even more disturbing: refeeding syndrome. If someone who's been starving for weeks is given food too quickly, it can kill them. When you start eating again after prolonged starvation, your body's electrolyte balance shifts dramatically. Insulin levels spike, driving phosphate, potassium, and magnesium into cells. Blood levels of these electrolytes drop dangerously low, causing cardiac arrhythmias, respiratory failure, seizures. Concentration camp survivors and prisoners of war have died within days of liberation because well-meaning rescuers fed them too much, too fast. The body, adapted to starvation, can't handle sudden abundance. This is why refeeding has to be done carefully, slowly, with medical supervision. Small amounts of easily digestible food, electrolyte monitoring, gradual increases in calories over days or weeks. The body needs time to readjust, to remember how to process normal amounts of food, to restore its metabolic balance. Starvation doesn't just damage you during the fasting period. It creates a fragile state that persists even after food becomes available again. So as you lie here tonight, maybe you skip dinner, maybe you're doing intermittent fasting, maybe your stomach is growling a little. That's just ghrelin, just your body's gentle reminder that it's been a few hours since you ate. You're nowhere near starvation. Your glycogen stores are probably still full. Your body isn't breaking down muscle. You're fine. But those same mechanisms that allow you to skip a meal, that switch you into mild ketosis after 12 hours of fasting, those are the same mechanisms that would keep you alive if food truly disappeared. They're ancient, powerful, and still active in every cell of your body. Your body knows how to starve. It's been doing it for millions of years. Fortunately, most of us never have to test those limits. But if we're talking about extremes, starvation is only one end of the spectrum. Let's talk about the other end. What happens when the body has too much? If starvation is your body eating itself to survive, obesity is your body storing energy it can't use, packing it away in cells that expand and multiply and never truly disappear. And the disturbing truth about obesity is that it's not just about willpower or lifestyle choices. It's about biology that's working exactly as evolution designed it, in an environment evolution never anticipated. Your body is trying to protect you from a famine that's never coming, and in the process, it's slowly destroying itself. Let's start with fat cells, adipocytes. You're born with a certain number of them, and that number increases throughout childhood and adolescence. By the time you reach adulthood, you have somewhere between 10 billion and 30 billion fat cells, depending on your genetics and early life nutrition. And here's the disturbing part. That number almost never goes down. When you gain weight, your fat cells don't just fill up, they expand, growing larger as they pack more and more triglycerides into their storage compartments. A single fat cell can increase its volume by up to 10 times. But there's a limit to how much a single cell can expand. And when your existing fat cells reach capacity, your body does something you probably wish it wouldn't. It creates new fat cells. This process, called adipogenesis, recruits precursor cells and differentiates them into mature adipocytes. You now have more fat cells. And once created, these cells are permanent. They can shrink when you lose weight, emptying their lipid stores, but they don't die. They don't go away. They just sit there, smaller but still present, waiting to fill up again. This is why weight loss is so difficult to maintain. When you lose weight, you're not losing fat cells, you're just emptying them. And empty fat cells are metabolically active. They secrete hormones, particularly leptin, which should tell your brain that you have adequate energy stores. But in people who've lost significant weight, leptin levels drop. Your brain interprets this as starvation, even if you're at a healthy weight. It increases hunger signals, decreases metabolic rate, makes you feel tired and sluggish. Your body is trying to refill those empty fat cells, trying to get back to the weight it remembers as normal. This is called the set point theory, and while it's still debated, the evidence is substantial. Your body seems to defend a certain weight range, and it defends it aggressively. People who lose large amounts of weight often report being constantly hungry, obsessed with food, tired all the time. Their metabolic rate can drop by 10 to 15% below what would be expected for their new body size. It's not just that they're burning fewer calories because they weigh less. They're burning fewer calories than someone who has always been that weight. Their body is in conservation mode, trying to restore the fat it thinks it needs. And obesity isn't just about having too much fat. It's about where that fat is stored. Subcutaneous fat, the fat just under your skin, is relatively benign, its storage. But visceral fat, the fat that accumulates around your internal organs, your liver, your intestines, your heart, this fat is metabolically active and inflammatory. It secretes cytokines, signaling molecules that trigger chronic, low-grade inflammation throughout your body. This inflammation is linked to insulin resistance, cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, even cognitive decline. Insulin resistance is particularly insidious. Normally, when you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises and your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin signals your cells to take up glucose from the bloodstream. Your muscle cells use it for energy, your liver stores it as glycogen, your fat cells convert it to triglycerides for long-term storage. But when you have chronic excess energy intake, when your cells are constantly being told to store more and more, they become less responsive to insulin. They down-regulate their insulin receptors. The pancreas has to produce more and more insulin to achieve the same effect. Eventually, you develop metabolic syndrome. High blood sugar, high blood pressure, high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol. and excess visceral fat. Your pancreas is working overtime, producing insulin that your cells are increasingly ignoring. And if this continues for years, your pancreas can't keep up. The insulin-producing beta cells become exhausted, start to die off. Your blood sugar rises permanently. You've developed type 2 diabetes, a disease that was once rare and is now epidemic, affecting over 400 million people worldwide. And diabetes isn't just about blood sugar. High glucose levels damage blood vessels, leading to cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death globally. It damages nerves, causing peripheral neuropathy, pain and numbness in your extremities. It damages your kidneys, which have to filter all that excess glucose, leading to kidney failure. It damages your eyes, causing diabetic retinopathy and blindness. It impairs wound healing, making minor injuries turn into chronic ulcers that can require amputation. Diabetes is a systemic disease that slowly destroys your body from multiple angles simultaneously. But let's go back to the fat cells themselves, because there's more happening there than just storage. Adipose tissue is an endocrine organ. It produces hormones. Leptin, which we mentioned, signals satiety and energy balance. Adiponectin, which improves insulin sensitivity and has anti-inflammatory effect. But in obesity, especially with visceral fat, the balance shifts. Leptin production increases, but the brain becomes resistant to it, a phenomenon called leptin resistance. You have high levels of a hormone that should suppress appetite, but your brain can't sense it properly. So you stay hungry despite having massive energy reserves. And adiponectin production decreases. The more visceral fat you have, the less adiponectin you produce, creating a vicious cycle. Less adiponectin means worse insulin sensitivity, more inflammation, more fat accumulation. The fat tissue itself is contributing to the metabolic dysfunction that makes it harder to lose weight and easier to gain more. When fat cells become overstuffed, when they're storing more lipid than they're designed to handle, they experience stress. Some of them die. And when fat cells die, they trigger an immune response. Macrophages, immune cells that normally clean up debris and fight infections, infiltrate the adipose tissue. But instead of resolving the problem, they take up residence and secrete inflammatory cytokines. Your fat tissue becomes chronically inflamed, a low-grade infection that your immune system can't clear because the source, the overstuffed dying fat cells, keeps regenerating. This chronic inflammation affects your entire body. It makes your blood vessels more prone to atherosclerosis, plaque buildup that narrows arteries and can lead to heart attacks and strokes. It affects your brain, potentially contributing to depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Studies have found associations between obesity and increased risk of Alzheimer's disease, possibly mediated by inflammation and insulin resistance affecting brain metabolism. Your fat isn't just sitting there. It's actively participating in disease processes throughout your body. And sleep makes it worse. Or rather, lack of sleep makes it worse. Sleep deprivation affects the hormones that regulate hunger and satiety. When you don't sleep enough, ghrelin levels increase and leptin levels decrease. You feel hungrier, you crave high-calorie foods, and your ability to resist those cravings is impaired because your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-control, is functioning poorly. People who chronically sleep less than 6 hours per night have significantly higher rates of obesity than those who sleep 7 to 9 hours. And obesity, in turn, disrupts sleep. Excess weight especially around the neck and torso, can cause obstructive sleep apnea, where your airway repeatedly collapses during sleep, cutting off your oxygen supply. You wake up briefly, sometimes dozens or hundreds of times per night, though you might not remember it. Your sleep quality is destroyed. You spend less time in deep sleep, less time in REM sleep, the restorative stages your brain needs. You wake up tired, your cognitive function is impaired, your mood suffers, and because you're tired, you're less likely to exercise, more likely to eat for energy, more likely to gain more weight. It's a feedback loop, each problem reinforcing the others. So obesity isn't a simple problem with a simple solution. It's a complex interplay of genetics, environment, metabolism, hormones, inflammation, and behavior. Your body is doing what it's supposed to do: store energy for future use. But in an environment of constant food availability, especially calorie-dense processed foods, that ancient survival mechanism becomes a liability. Your fat cells fill and multiply, your metabolism shifts toward storage, inflammation takes hold, and your body slowly accumulates damage that will take years or decades to fully manifest. And all the while, your brain is telling you you're still hungry, still need to eat, still need to prepare for a famine that will never come. But if obesity represents your body storing too much, there's another way your body can turn against you, one that's even more direct. Let's talk about autoimmunity. Your immune system is supposed to protect you. It's an army of specialized cells patrolling your body, searching for threats: bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, anything foreign that might cause harm. And it's extraordinarily good at this. It can distinguish between your own cells and invaders with remarkable precision, launching attacks against the dangerous and leaving the harmless alone. Except when it can't. Except when it gets confused and decides that parts of your own body are the enemy. That's autoimmunity, and it's your immune system trying to kill you. The human immune system is built on a principle called self-tolerance. During development, your immune cells, particularly T cells and B cells, go through a rigorous training process. They're created in your bone marrow and thymus, and as they mature, they're tested. Any cell that reacts strongly to your own proteins, your own tissues, is supposed to be eliminated. It's a selection process designed to ensure that your immune system only attacks foreign threats, never you. But this process isn't perfect. Some self-reactive cells escape, and under the right conditions, they can activate and start attacking your own tissues. Take type 1 diabetes. This isn't the type 2 diabetes we discussed earlier, caused by insulin resistance and lifestyle. Type 1 is autoimmune. Your immune system decides that the beta cells in your pancreas, the cells that produce insulin, are foreign. T cells infiltrate the pancreas and systematically destroy these cells. Over months or years, your insulin production drops until you can't regulate your blood sugar at all. You become dependent on external insulin injections for the rest of your life, and there's no way to stop it once it starts. The immune attack continues until nearly all your beta cells are gone. Or consider multiple sclerosis. Here, the immune system attacks myelin, the fatty insulation that wraps around nerve fibers in your brain and spinal cord. Myelin allows electrical signals to travel quickly and efficiently along neurons. Without it, those signals slow down or stop entirely. You develop numbness, weakness, vision problems, difficulty walking, cognitive impairment. The damage accumulates over years, leaving scars, lesions, visible on brain scans, and it's progressive. Each immune attack causes more damage, more disability. Your own immune cells are literally destroying the wiring of your nervous system. Rheumatoid arthritis attacks your joints. The immune system targets the synovium, the lining of your joints, causing chronic inflammation. Your joints become swollen, painful, stiff. Over time, the inflammation damages cartilage and bone. Your fingers become deformed. Simple tasks like opening a jar or buttoning a shirt become agonizing. And it's not just joints. Rheumatoid arthritis can cause inflammation in your lungs, your heart, your blood vessels. It's a systemic disease, your immune system waging war on multiple fronts simultaneously. Lupus, formerly systemic lupus erythematosus, can attack almost anything. Skin, joints, kidneys, heart, lungs, brain. The immune system produces antibodies against your own DNA, against proteins in your cell nuclei. These antibodies form immune complexes that deposit in tissues and trigger inflammation. You might develop a characteristic butterfly-shaped rash across your face. You might have joint pain, fatigue, fever. Your kidneys might start failing as immune complexes damage the filtration structures. Some lupus patients develop neuropsychiatric symptoms, psychosis, seizures, severe cognitive dysfunction. Your brain is under attack from your own antibodies. And the truly disturbing part is how common autoimmune diseases are. Collectively, they affect somewhere between 5 and 8% of the population. That's hundreds of millions of people worldwide living with immune systems that have turned against them, and the rates are increasing. We're not entirely sure why, but there are theories. The hygiene hypothesis suggests that our modern, sanitized environments don't expose our immune systems to enough microbes during development. Without proper training, without diverse microbial challenges, the immune system becomes hyperactive, misdirected, more likely to attack self. Another factor might be changes in the microbiome. We talked earlier about how trillions of bacteria live in your gut and influence your health. Those bacteria also train your immune system, teaching it to tolerate beneficial microbes while attacking pathogens. But antibiotic use, processed diets, cesarean births, all of these can disrupt the microbiome. And a disrupted microbiome might fail to properly educate the immune system, increasing the risk of autoimmunity. There are also genetic factors. Certain gene variants increase susceptibility to specific autoimmune diseases. The HLA region, a cluster of genes that help the immune system distinguish self from non-self, shows strong associations with autoimmunity. If you inherit certain HLA variants, your risk of developing diseases like type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, or celiac disease increases significantly. But genes aren't destiny. Most people with high-risk gene variants never develop autoimmune disease. Something else, an environmental trigger, an infection, chronic stress, has to activate the process. And then there's molecular mimicry, one of the most unsettling mechanisms. Sometimes proteins from bacteria or viruses look similar to your own proteins. Your immune system learns to attack the pathogen, produces antibodies and T cells that recognize its proteins. But because of the similarity, those same immune cells also recognize your own tissues. The infection is cleared, but the autoimmune response persists. This might be what happens in rheumatic fever, where a strep throat infection triggers immune responses that attack heart valves. The bacteria are gone, but your immune system keeps fighting, now targeting you. Treatment for autoimmune diseases is difficult because you're trying to suppress an immune system that's too active without suppressing it so much that you become vulnerable to infection. Immunosuppressive drugs, corticosteroids, biologics that block specific immune signals. These can reduce symptoms and slow disease progression. But they come with costs. Increased infection risk, increased cancer risk, side effects ranging from weight gain to organ damage. You're trying to find a balance between controlling the autoimmune attack and maintaining enough immune function to survive. And some autoimmune reactions happen quickly, violently, in what's called a cytokine storm. This is when the immune system doesn't just attack. It goes into overdrive, producing massive amounts of inflammatory cytokines, signaling molecules that recruit more and more immune cells. The inflammation becomes systemic, overwhelming, your blood pressure drops, your organs start failing, fluid floods into your lungs. This can happen in severe infections, in certain drug reactions, even in some COVID-19 cases. The pathogen itself isn't killing you. Your immune system's overreaction is. Allergies are a milder form of this immune system confusion. Your immune system decides that harmless substances, pollen, pet dander, certain foods are dangerous. It mounts an immune response, producing IgE antibodies that trigger the release of histamine and other inflammatory mediators. You get runny nose, itchy eyes, hives. In severe cases, anaphylaxis, your throat swells, your blood pressure crashes. You can die from exposure to something as innocuous as a peanut. Your immune system, trying to protect you, becomes the threat. And this extends to transplants. If you receive a donated organ, a kidney, a heart, a liver, your immune system recognizes it as foreign. The tissue has different HLA markers, different surface proteins, and so your immune system attacks it, tries to reject it. This is why transplant recipients have to take immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their lives. They're artificially dampening their immune systems to prevent them from destroying the organ they need to survive. It's a constant balancing act, suppressing the immune system enough to prevent rejection, but not so much that infections become life-threatening. Even pregnancy involves immune tolerance. The fetus is genetically half from the father, expressing proteins that are foreign to the mother's immune system. By all logic, the mother's immune system should recognize the fetus as an invader and attack it. But it doesn't, most of the time. The placenta creates an immunologically privileged site, producing factors that suppress local immune responses. The mother's immune system is actively tolerating something foreign growing inside her. When this tolerance breaks down, you get complications like preeclampsia or recurrent miscarriages, cases where the immune system partially rejects the pregnancy. So, your immune system, this elaborate defense network that's kept humans alive through plagues and infections and parasites for hundreds of thousands of years, is also capable of turning inward, of mistaking friend for foe, of attacking the very body it's supposed to protect. And when it does, the damage can be slow and progressive or sudden and catastrophic. You can't escape your immune system. You can't negotiate with it. You can only try to manage it, suppress it, redirect it, and hope that the treatments don't cause as much harm as the disease. But at least autoimmune diseases involve familiar biological processes, cells and antibodies and inflammation. There's something even stranger, even more disturbing, that can infect your brain. Let's talk about prions. Prions are not alive. They're not bacteria, not viruses, not parasites. They're proteins. Just proteins. But they're proteins that have folded wrong, twisted into an abnormal shape, and that abnormal shape is infectious. It can convert other proteins, normal proteins in your brain, into the same misfolded form. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. It spreads through your brain tissue like a chain reaction, and there's no way to stop it. No cure, no treatment, nothing. Just a slow, inevitable destruction of your mind. Let's start with what proteins are supposed to do. Proteins are the workhorses of your cells, molecular machines that perform almost every biological function. They're long chains of amino acids that fold into specific three-dimensional shapes. That shape is everything. A protein's shape determines what it does, what it binds to, how it functions. Enzymes, antibodies, structural proteins, signaling molecules, they all depend on being folded correctly. Your cells have quality control systems, chaperone proteins that help other proteins fold properly and refold them if they start to misfold. But sometimes, a protein misfolds in a way that's stable, that resists correction, and in the case of prion proteins, that misfolded shape has a disturbing property. It's a template. When a misfolded prion protein comes into contact with a normal prion protein, it induces the normal protein to change shape, to adopt the same abnormal configuration. The newly misfolded protein can then convert others. It's not reproduction in the traditional sense. It's corruption, a spreading conformational change that turns healthy proteins into toxic ones. Normal prion proteins, abbreviated PRP, exist in your brain right now. They're on the surface of neurons, and their exact function isn't fully understood, but they seem to be involved in cell signaling and protection. They're harmless, but when they misfold into the disease form, called Pri-P-Scrapie, they become insoluble, resistant to breakdown, and they accumulate. They form clumps, aggregates that your brain can't clear. And as they accumulate, they cause neurons to die. The diseases caused by prions are called transmissible spongiform encephalopathies because they create holes in the brain, literally. As neurons die and aren't replaced, your brain tissue becomes porous, sponge-like. Under a microscope, it looks like Swiss cheese. And the symptoms are neurological and psychiatric. Memory loss, confusion, personality changes, loss of coordination, involuntary movements, eventually total cognitive collapse and death. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, or CJD, is the most well-known human prion disease. It's rare, affecting about 1 in every 1 million people per year. Most cases are sporadic, appearing randomly without any known cause. The prion protein in someone's brain just spontaneously misfolds one day and the cascade begins. Other cases are inherited, caused by mutations in the gene that codes for the prion protein. These mutations make the protein more likely to misfold. If you inherit one of these mutations, you have a high likelihood of developing prion disease at some point in your life. And then there are acquired cases, where the prion is transmitted from an external source. This is what happened with mad cow disease, or bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Cattle were fed meat and bone meal made from other cattle, including neural tissue. Some of those cattle had prions. The prions survived the rendering process, were eaten by other cattle, crossed into their brains, and caused disease. And when humans ate beef from infected cattle, some contracted variant CJD. The prions crossed species barriers. They survived cooking, survived digestion, made it into the human brain, and started converting human prion proteins. The incubation period for prion diseases can be decades. You could be infected today and not show symptoms for 20 or 30 years. The prions are slowly accumulating, slowly spreading through your brain, killing neurons one by one. By the time symptoms appear, the damage is already extensive. and once symptoms start, progression is rapid. From first symptoms to death is usually less than a year, sometimes just months. You lose your ability to walk, to speak, to swallow. You develop dementia, visual disturbances, seizures, and then you die. There's no treatment. Nothing slows it down. Researchers have tried antivirals, immunosuppressants, every class of drug imaginable. Nothing works. Prions aren't alive, so you can't kill them. They're just misfolded proteins, and there's no drug that can refold them or prevent them from converting others. You can't develop immunity because your immune system doesn't recognize them as foreign. They're your own proteins, just shaped wrong. And prions are almost indestructible. Standard sterilization techniques don't work. Boiling doesn't denature them. Alcohol doesn't inactivate them. Formaldehyde, which is used to sterilize medical equipment and preserve biological specimens, doesn't affect them. Even autoclaving, high-pressure steam at temperatures above 120 degrees Celsius, isn't fully effective unless done for extended periods at extreme temperatures. Prions have contaminated surgical instruments, and despite standard sterilization, have transmitted disease to subsequent patients. Medical facilities now have special protocols for instruments that may have contacted neural tissue from patients with suspected prion disease. Often, those instruments are simply destroyed rather than risked. One of the most disturbing prion diseases is Kuru, which affected the 4 people of Papua New Guinea. It was transmitted through mortuary cannibalism, a cultural practice where deceased relatives were consumed as part of funeral rites. Brain tissue was eaten, and the prions in that tissue infected those who consumed it. Women and children were primarily affected because they were the ones who prepared and consumed the bodies. The disease caused uncontrollable tremors, loss of coordination, emotional instability, and eventually death. After the practice of mortuary cannibalism ended in the early 1960s, Kuru cases gradually declined. But some people who were exposed as children didn't develop symptoms until 40 or 50 years later, demonstrating just how long prions can incubate silently. And then there's fatal familial insomnia, perhaps the most horrifying prion disease. It's caused by a specific mutation in the prion protein gene, and it's inherited. If you have the mutation, you will develop the disease, usually in middle age. It starts with insomnia. You can't sleep. Not occasional sleeplessness, but total, progressive insomnia. You lie awake night after night. Sleep medications don't work. Your body loses the ability to enter deep sleep stages. You might get brief moments of light sleep, but no restorative sleep, no REM. As the disease progresses, you develop hallucinations, panic attacks, rapid weight loss. Your autonomic nervous system starts failing. You sweat profusely, your heart rate becomes irregular, your blood pressure fluctuates wildly. You become increasingly confused, disoriented, and you're still not sleeping. Your brain is being destroyed by prions, and without sleep, it has no chance to clear the metabolic waste, to repair damage, to function. You're essentially being tortured by your own biology. From first symptoms to death is usually about 18 months, and there's nothing anyone can do. The prions in fatal familial insomnia specifically target the thalamus, a brain region involved in regulating sleep and wakefulness. As the thalamus degenerates, it loses the ability to initiate and maintain sleep. You're conscious, exhausted, desperate for rest that never comes. Some patients have been monitored in sleep labs, and the recordings show almost no normal sleep architecture. Just fragmented, brief periods of drowsiness that never deepen into real sleep. It's a death sentence delivered through sleeplessness. Prions remind us that disease doesn't require life. A misfolded protein, a shape, a configuration of atoms can be as deadly as any virus or bacterium. And because prions are so stable, so resistant to destruction, they persist in the environment. Soil can remain contaminated with prions for years. Animals that die of prion disease leave prions in the ground, and those prions can infect other animals that disturb the soil decades later. It's a kind of immortality, but a malevolent one. So, as you lie here tonight, trying to fall asleep, your brain is full of normal prion proteins. They're there, right now, on the surface of your neurons, doing whatever it is they do. And, statistically, the chance that one of them will spontaneously misfold and start a cascade is incredibly small, almost negligible, but not zero. Never zero. It's one of those rare biological horrors that can strike anyone, anytime, for no reason. A single protein folds wrong, and your brain begins to die. But at least prion diseases are rare, sleep problems are not, and the biology of sleep itself is stranger than you might think. You do it every night. You lie down, close your eyes, and lose consciousness for hours. Your brain shuts down large portions of itself, your muscles go limp, and you spend a third of your life in this vulnerable, unconscious state. And yet, you have no choice. Sleep is not optional. It's as fundamental to survival as food or water. But what's actually happening during those hours of darkness is far stranger and more disturbing than most people realize. Let's start with what sleep actually is. It's not just rest. It's not your brain turning off. It's an active, highly organized process involving distinct stages, each with specific functions. When you first fall asleep, you enter non-REM stage 1, a light sleep where you drift in and out of consciousness. Your brain waves slow down from the rapid beta waves of wakefulness to slower alpha and theta waves. This lasts only a few minutes before you descend into stage 2, where your brain waves slow further and you become less aware of your surroundings. Your body temperature drops, your heart rate slows.
Then comes stage 3, deep sleep, sometimes called slow wave sleep.
This is when your brain produces delta waves, slow, high-amplitude oscillations that sweep across your cortex in synchronized patterns. This is the most restorative stage of sleep, the time when your body repairs tissues, builds bone and muscle, strengthens your immune system. And it's also when something remarkable happens. Your brain starts cleaning itself. During waking hours, your brain cells are tightly packed, maximizing the number of connections and the efficiency of signaling. But during deep sleep, your neurons actually shrink, pulling away from each other slightly. The extracellular space, the gaps between cells, expands by up to 60%. And through these expanded channels, cerebrospinal fluid flows in waves, flushing through your brain tissue like a dishwasher cycle. This is the glymphatic system, a waste clearance mechanism that's only active during sleep. All day long, as your neurons fire and metabolize energy, they produce waste products, metabolic byproducts, misfolded proteins, cellular debris.
One of the most concerning waste products is beta amyloid, a protein fragment that can aggregate into plaques.
These plaques are found in the brains of Alzheimer's patients, clogging the spaces between neurons and contributing to cognitive decline. During sleep, the glymphatic system flushes beta amyloid out of your brain, carrying it away through the cerebrospinal fluid to be filtered by your body's normal waste disposal systems. But if you don't sleep enough, if you chronically cut your sleep short, this cleaning process doesn't happen adequately. Beta amyloid accumulates, and there's evidence that this accumulation over years or decades might contribute to neurodegenerative disease. Sleep isn't just for feeling rested. It's for preventing your brain from drowning in its own metabolic garbage. Every night you skimp on sleep, you're allowing toxic proteins to build up in your neural tissue. After cycling through the non-REM stages, you enter REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, where dreaming primarily occurs. This stage is bizarre. Your brain becomes nearly as active as it is when you're awake. Your eyes dart back and forth beneath your closed lids, scanning a visual landscape that doesn't exist. Your heart rate and breathing become irregular, but your body, except for your eyes and diaphragm, is paralyzed, completely paralyzed. This paralysis is called REM atonia, and it's protective. Your brain is generating intense neural activity, simulating experiences, and if your muscles could respond, you'd be acting out your dreams. You'd be moving, fighting, running, potentially injuring yourself or anyone sleeping near you. So your brainstem sends inhibitory signals down your spinal cord, blocking motor commands from reaching your muscles. You're locked in place, conscious in your dream, but unable to move in reality. Except sometimes, the system fails. In REM sleep behavior disorder, the paralysis doesn't engage properly. People with this condition do act out their dreams. They punch, kick, scream, leap out of bed. They've injured themselves and their partners, sometimes severely. And REM sleep behavior disorder is often an early sign of neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's or Lewy body dementia. The same brain regions that fail to maintain REM atonia are often the first areas affected by these diseases. And then there's the opposite problem, sleep paralysis. This happens when you wake up before REM atonia has fully released. You're conscious, aware of your surroundings, but completely unable to move. You can't speak, can't open your eyes voluntarily, can't even take a deep breath because your respiratory muscles are still partially inhibited. And because your brain is transitioning between sleep and wakefulness, you might still be experiencing dream imagery overlaid on reality. Hallucinations, often terrifying ones. A sense of presence in the room, a figure standing over you, pressure on your chest. Sleep paralysis has been reported across cultures for centuries. The old hag phenomenon in Newfoundland, the shadow person in modern Western accounts, the incubus and succubus in medieval Europe. These aren't supernatural entities. They're your brain's attempt to make sense of being conscious but paralyzed, projecting threat onto a situation where you're vulnerable and unable to escape. The experience usually lasts only seconds to a few minutes, but it's intensely distressing, and it's relatively common. About 8% of people experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. Then there's sleep inertia, that groggy, disoriented feeling when you first wake up. Your brain doesn't transition instantly from sleep to full wakefulness. Parts of your brain, particularly your prefrontal cortex, which handles complex reasoning and decision-making, remain in a sleep-like state for up to 30 minutes after you open your eyes. Your reaction times are slow, your judgment is impaired, you struggle to think clearly. This is why making important decisions immediately after waking is a bad idea. Your brain is still partially asleep, still caught between states. And in some cases, sleep inertia becomes extreme, a condition called sleep drunkenness or confusional arousal. You wake up, but you're profoundly disoriented, confused about where you are or what's happening. You might say things that make no sense, try to answer a phone that isn't ringing, get out of bed and wander around without any real awareness of what you're doing. Episodes can last minutes to hours, and you usually don't remember them afterward. Your brain was awake enough to control your body, but not awake enough to form coherent thoughts or memories. But the most disturbing sleep-related phenomenon is what happens when you don't sleep at all. Total sleep deprivation is devastating. The current record for the longest a human has gone without sleep is 11 days, set by Randy Gardner in 1964 as part of a science fair project. By the end, he was experiencing severe cognitive impairment, hallucinations, paranoia, and difficulty with basic tasks. But he survived, and after sleeping for 14 hours, he recovered mostly normally. But that was acute sleep deprivation with eventual recovery. Fatal familial insomnia, which we discussed earlier, shows what happens with total, irreversible insomnia. You don't just become tired. Your brain begins to fail. You lose the ability to regulate body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure. You hallucinate constantly. You become demented, and you die, usually within a year of symptom onset. Sleep is not a luxury, it's a biological necessity. Without it, your brain cannot function. Without it, you cannot survive. Even chronic partial sleep deprivation, the kind most people experience regularly, has serious consequences. Sleeping 6 hours per night instead of 8 might not feel that different, but over weeks and months, the effects accumulate. Cognitive performance declines. Reaction times slow. Your ability to consolidate memories is impaired. Your immune system weakens, making you more susceptible to infections. Your risk of cardiovascular disease increases. Your emotional regulation suffers, making you more irritable, more anxious, more prone to depression. And you usually don't even realize how impaired you are. One of the cruel tricks of sleep deprivation is that it impairs your ability to judge your own impairment. You think you're functioning normally, but objective tests show significant deficits. People who chronically sleep only 6 hours per night perform as poorly on cognitive tasks as people who have been totally sleep deprived for 2 nights. But they don't feel that tired. They've adapted to functioning in a diminished state and no longer recognize it as abnormal. Your brain needs sleep, not wants it, needs it. It needs the deep sleep to clear waste, to consolidate memories, to repair cellular damage. It needs REM sleep to process emotions, to integrate new information, to maintain psychological health. And when you deprive your brain of these stages, you're not just tired. You're accumulating damage that might take years to fully manifest, but will eventually. Every night of insufficient sleep is a small withdrawal from your cognitive bank account. And like any account, you can only run a deficit for so long before the system collapses. So, as you lie here tonight, as your brain begins its nightly cleaning cycle, as your neurons shrink and cerebrospinal fluid flows and your body repairs itself, remember that this is not wasted time. This is essential maintenance. This is your brain taking out the trash, filing away memories, preparing you for tomorrow. Sleep is not weakness. It's one of the most important things your body does. But of course, being alive means being vulnerable to damage. And sometimes that damage comes suddenly, violently. Let's talk about what happens when your body experiences trauma. Pain is your body's alarm system. A signal that something is wrong, that tissue is being damaged, that you need to pay attention and do something about it. It's unpleasant by design. Evolution made pain hurt because organisms that couldn't feel pain didn't survive long enough to reproduce. They injured themselves repeatedly, failed to notice infections, didn't avoid danger. Pain is protective. But that doesn't make it any less disturbing, especially when you understand what's actually happening in your nervous system when you feel it. Let's start with the basics. Pain begins with nociceptors, specialized nerve endings scattered throughout your body. They're in your skin, your muscles, your joints, your internal organs, everywhere except your brain, which ironically has no pain receptors of its own. These nociceptors respond to different types of damage: mechanical, like cutting or crushing; thermal, like burning or freezing; and chemical, like acids or inflammatory molecules. When tissue is damaged, cells release chemicals, prostaglandins, bradykinin, substance P, that activate these nociceptors. The activated nociceptor sends an electrical signal along its nerve fiber toward your spinal cord. There are two types of pain fibers. A-delta fibers are fast, myelinated, and they carry sharp, immediate pain. This is the pain you feel the instant you cut your finger or stub your toe. It's precise, localized, designed to make you react immediately. Then there are C fibers, slower, unmyelinated, carrying dull, aching, burning pain. This is the pain that comes a moment later and lingers. The throbbing, the ache that reminds you something is damaged, even after the initial injury. These signals travel to your spinal cord, where they synapse with neurons in the dorsal horn, a region that acts as a relay station. From there, the signal travels up to your brain, specifically to the thalamus, which routes sensory information to different brain regions. Pain signals go to your somatosensory cortex, which tells you where the pain is coming from and what kind of damage it is. They go to your limbic system, which generates the emotional response, the distress, the suffering, and they go to your prefrontal cortex, which thinks about the pain, worries about it, gives it meaning. This is why pain is not just a sensation, it's an experience. Two people with identical injuries can experience vastly different amounts of pain depending on context, attention, emotional state. A soldier injured in combat might not feel pain until hours later when the adrenaline wears off. An athlete can push through pain that would stop someone else. Your brain modulates pain, turning the volume up or down based on what else is happening. It's not that the injury is different. It's that the brain's interpretation of the signal is different. But sometimes the pain system itself becomes the problem. Chronic pain is pain that persists long after the initial injury has healed, or pain that exists without any obvious injury at all. This isn't weakness or imagination. It's your nervous system malfunctioning. After repeated or prolonged pain signals, neurons in your spinal cord and brain become sensitized. They lower their threshold for activation, start firing more easily, sometimes spontaneously. This is called central sensitization, and it means your nervous system is now amplifying pain signals that should be mild or interpreting normal sensations as painful. People with chronic pain conditions like fibromyalgia or complex regional pain syndrome can experience excruciating pain from stimuli that shouldn't hurt at all. A light touch, a gentle pressure, even the weight of clothing on skin can be agonizing. Their pain system is stuck in a hypersensitive state, the volume turned up to maximum with no way to turn it down. And, because the problem is in the nervous system itself, treating the supposed source of pain doesn't help. The tissue is fine. The nerves are the problem. Then there's phantom limb pain, one of the strangest pain phenomena. When someone loses a limb through amputation, many of them continue to feel the missing limb. They can sense its position, feel it move, and often feel intense pain in a body part that no longer exists. The pain can be burning, stabbing, cramping, excruciating, and there's nothing to treat because the limb is gone. The pain is coming from the brain's representation of the body, the sensory map that still includes the missing limb. Neurons that used to receive input from that limb are now firing without input, and the brain interprets this as pain. On the opposite end, there are people born with congenital insensitivity to pain. They have mutations in genes involved in pain signaling, so their nociceptors can't transmit pain signals properly. This sounds like a superpower, but it's a curse. These individuals injure themselves constantly because they have no warning system. They bite through their tongues as children, break bones without realizing it, develop infections that go unnoticed until they're life-threatening. Pain is unpleasant, but it's essential. Without it, your body destroys itself through neglect. And pain affects sleep profoundly. Chronic pain is one of the most common causes of insomnia. You lie down, trying to rest, but the pain won't let you. It demands attention. It keeps your nervous system aroused, prevents you from relaxing enough to fall asleep, and when you do sleep, pain disrupts it. You wake more frequently, spend less time in deep sleep, wake up feeling unrefreshed. And poor sleep makes pain worse. Sleep deprivation lowers your pain threshold, makes you more sensitive to painful stimuli. It's a vicious cycle. Pain prevents sleep. Lack of sleep amplifies pain. But pain isn't the only way your body can suffer. Sometimes the damage is so severe, so sudden, that your body's response becomes the danger. This is shock, a state where your cardiovascular system can no longer deliver adequate oxygen and nutrients to your tissues. It can happen from massive blood loss, from severe infections, from heart failure, from allergic reactions. Your blood pressure drops, your organs start to fail, and without immediate treatment, you die. Hypovolemic shock comes from losing too much blood or fluid, maybe from trauma, a car accident, a gunshot wound, anything that causes severe bleeding. As blood volume drops, your heart has less to pump. Your blood pressure falls. Your body tries to compensate by constricting blood vessels, redirecting what little blood remains to your most vital organs, your brain and heart. Your extremities get cut off first. Your hands and feet become cold, pale. Your kidneys reduce urine output, trying to conserve fluid. But if the bleeding continues, if volume isn't replaced, your organs start dying from lack of oxygen. Septic shock happens when a severe infection triggers a massive inflammatory response. Bacteria or their toxins in your bloodstream cause your blood vessels to dilate, to become leaky. Fluid shifts out of your bloodstream into tissues, causing swelling and dropping your blood pressure. Your immune system goes into overdrive, producing cytokines that cause more inflammation, more damage. Your blood starts clotting inappropriately, using up clotting factors and platelets, which then leads to bleeding elsewhere. It's called disseminated intravascular coagulation, and it's often fatal. You're clotting and bleeding simultaneously, your blood system in complete chaos. Anaphylactic shock is an extreme allergic reaction. Exposure to an allergen, a bee sting, a peanut, a medication triggers massive release of histamine and other mediators. Your blood vessels dilate, your airways constrict, fluid leaks out of your bloodstream. Your blood pressure crashes, you can't breathe, and within minutes you can lose consciousness and die. This is why people with severe allergies carry epinephrine auto-injectors. Epinephrine constricts blood vessels, opens airways, buys time to get to a hospital. Without it, anaphylaxis can kill in under an hour. And then there's crush syndrome. something that happens in disasters, building collapses, prolonged entrapment. When a limb or body part is crushed and compressed for hours, muscle tissue starts to die. When the pressure is finally released, when the victim is freed, all the toxic contents of those dead muscle cells, potassium, myoglobin, phosphate, flood into the bloodstream. Potassium causes cardiac arrhythmias. Myoglobin clogs the kidneys, causing acute kidney failure. Victims can be rescued, seem okay initially, and then die hours later from the metabolic chaos unleashed by releasing the crush injury. Burns are another category of severe trauma. When skin is burned, it's not just the immediate damage. Severe burns destroy the skin's barrier function. Fluid leaks out, leading to massive fluid loss and shock. The damaged tissue releases inflammatory signals that cause systemic inflammation. Infection risk skyrockets because the protective skin barrier is gone. And burn wounds are incredibly painful because nerve endings are damaged but not destroyed, sending constant pain signals. Treatment involves removing dead tissue, replacing lost fluids, preventing infection, managing pain, and hoping the body can regenerate enough skin to survive. Your body is resilient. It can heal from remarkable damage. Bones knit back together, skin regrows, even liver tissue can regenerate if enough healthy tissue remains. But there are limits. Some injuries are too severe, too sudden, too overwhelming for your body's repair mechanisms. And sometimes the body's attempt to save itself, the inflammatory response, the clotting cascade, the immune activation, becomes the problem. Your body trying to protect you ends up causing more damage than the original injury. It's trying its best, activating ancient survival programs, but those programs evolved for different threats, different injuries, and in modern trauma, they sometimes make things worse. But even if you survive trauma, even if your body heals, there's one thing it can't escape. Let's talk about aging. Aging is not a disease. It's the default state of being alive. From the moment you're born, from the moment your cells start dividing, you're aging. Accumulating damage, losing function, slowly breaking down. It's universal, inevitable, and deeply unsettling when you understand what's actually happening at the cellular level. Your body is not designed to last forever. It's designed to last long enough to reproduce and raise offspring. After that, evolution doesn't care what happens to you. Let's start with telomeres. At the end of every chromosome in your cells, there are protective caps made of repetitive DNA sequences. Think of them like the plastic tips on shoelaces that prevent the laces from fraying. Telomeres protect your chromosomes from damage and prevent them from fusing with other chromosomes. But every time a cell divides, every time it copies its DNA, the telomeres get a little shorter. The DNA replication machinery can't fully copy the very ends of chromosomes, so a small piece is lost with each division. This is fine for a while. You're born with long telomeres, and you can afford to lose a little with each cell division. But there's a limit. After about 50 to 70 divisions, depending on the cell type, the telomeres become critically short. The cell recognizes this as DNA damage and stops dividing. It enters a state called cellular senescence, where it's still alive but no longer functional. It just sits there, taking up space, secreting inflammatory molecules that damage surrounding tissue. These are sometimes called zombie cells because they're not dead, but they're not really alive either. Senescent cells accumulate in your tissues as you age. They contribute to chronic inflammation, tissue dysfunction, age-related diseases. Your immune system is supposed to clear them out, but as you get older, your immune system becomes less efficient and senescent cells pile up. Researchers are now exploring senolytic drugs, compounds that can selectively kill senescent cells, hoping that clearing them out might slow or even partially reverse some aspects of aging. Early results in animals are promising, but human trials are still ongoing. But telomere shortening is just one mechanism of aging. There's also oxidative stress, damage caused by reactive oxygen species, free radicals produced as byproducts of normal metabolism. Every time your mitochondria produce energy, they generate these reactive molecules. And these molecules are promiscuous. They react with DNA, with proteins, with lipids, damaging cellular structures. Your cells have antioxidant defenses, enzymes that neutralize free radicals, but the defenses aren't perfect. Damage accumulates over time. Your DNA accumulates mutations, not just in telomeres, but throughout your genome. Copying errors, radiation damage, chemical damage, it all adds up. Most mutations are harmless, landing in parts of the genome that don't code for anything important. But some mutations hit critical genes involved in DNA repair, cell cycle regulation, tumor suppression. The more mutations you accumulate, the higher your risk of cancer, the more likely your cells are to malfunction. This is why cancer risk increases dramatically with age. You've had more time to accumulate the critical mutations that turn a normal cell into a cancer cell. Your proteins get damaged too. They oxidize, they glycate, they misfold. Glycation is particularly insidious. Glucose molecules can spontaneously attach to proteins, forming advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These modified proteins don't function properly. They're sticky, they aggregate, they trigger inflammation. AGEs accumulate in your blood vessels, contributing to atherosclerosis. They accumulate in your skin, making it less elastic, more wrinkled. They accumulate in your eyes, clouding the lens and contributing to cataracts. You're essentially being slowly caramelized from the inside. And your mitochondria, those cellular powerhouses we've mentioned, they wear out. Mitochondria have their own DNA, separate from your nuclear DNA, and it's more vulnerable to damage because it's not as well protected. As mitochondrial DNA accumulates mutations, mitochondria become less efficient at producing energy. They produce more reactive oxygen species, causing more damage, creating a vicious cycle. Your cells have less energy to maintain themselves, less ability to repair damage, and they start to fail. This is why older people often feel tired, have less stamina, recover more slowly from exertion. Your cells literally have less energy to work with. And when mitochondria become too damaged, they trigger apoptosis, programmed cell death, or they get cleared out by autophagy. But as you age, autophagy becomes less efficient. Damaged mitochondria accumulate, dragging down cellular function, contributing to age-related decline. There's also something called the Hayflick limit, named after the scientist Leonard Hayflick who discovered it. He found that normal human cells can only divide a limited number of times before they stop, typically around 50 divisions. This limit is partly due to telomere shortening, but it's also a fundamental property of cells. They're programmed to age, programmed to eventually stop dividing. It's a protective mechanism against cancer, preventing cells from dividing indefinitely. But it also means your body has a built-in expiration date. Some genetic diseases dramatically accelerate aging. Progeria, or Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, is caused by a mutation in a single gene that produces an abnormal protein called progerin. Children with progeria age at roughly 10 times the normal rate. By age 10, they have the physical appearance and health problems of someone in their 80s or 90s. Hair loss, aged skin, cardiovascular disease, arthritis. Most die of heart attacks or strokes in their early teens. It's devastating, but it's also illuminating. It shows that aging is controlled by specific molecular mechanisms, and when those mechanisms go wrong, the process accelerates dramatically. But not all organisms age the same way. Some animals seem to barely age at all. Naked mole rats can live over 30 years, far longer than other rodents of similar size, and they don't show typical signs of aging. They maintain fertility, cognitive function, and low cancer rates throughout their lives. Their cells are extremely resistant to oxidative stress, and they have very active DNA repair mechanisms. They do eventually die, but they don't decline the way most mammals do. Certain jellyfish, like Turritopsis dohrnii, can actually reverse their aging. When stressed or injured, they can revert from their adult form back to their juvenile polyp stage and start their life cycle over. They're theoretically immortal, though in practice, predators and disease kill them eventually. But the fact that it's possible that an organism can reset its biological clock suggests that aging is not as inevitable as we thought. It's a program, and programs can potentially be rewritten. Lobsters also don't seem to age in the traditional sense. They keep growing throughout their lives, they remain fertile, and they don't show increased mortality with age. They produce an enzyme called telomerase that rebuilds telomeres, preventing the shortening that limits cell division in most organisms. Lobsters eventually die, but usually from disease, predation, or exhaustion from molting their increasingly large shells, not from aging itself. They demonstrate that cellular senescence is not universal, that some organisms have found ways around it. But for humans, for now, aging is inevitable. Your cells divide, your telomeres shorten, your DNA accumulates damage, your proteins get glycated, your mitochondria wear out. You lose muscle mass, bone density, skin elasticity. Your immune system weakens, making you more vulnerable to infections and less able to clear senescent cells and cancer cells. Your cardiovascular system stiffens, your blood pressure rises, your risk of heart attack and stroke increases. Your brain shrinks slightly, you lose neurons, your cognitive processing slows. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, year by year. And sleep becomes more difficult as you age. Older adults spend less time in deep sleep, more time in light sleep. They wake more frequently during the night. Their circadian rhythms shift earlier, making them sleepy in the evening and wakeful in the early morning. Part of this is due to changes in the brain regions that regulate sleep. Part is due to changes in hormone production, and part is due to the accumulation of health problems that interfere with sleep. But the result is the same: less restorative sleep, more daytime fatigue, more cognitive decline. Some of aging's effects can be slowed. Exercise, caloric restriction, good sleep, stress management, these all help. They won't stop aging, but they can slow the accumulation of damage, keep your cells functioning better for longer. But ultimately, your body is a machine that's running constantly without a full overhaul, and machines break down, parts wear out. Systems fail. It's not a moral failing. It's not something you can overcome through willpower. It's thermodynamics, entropy. The universe tends toward disorder, and your body, without constant energy input and maintenance, tends toward dysfunction.
So as you lie here tonight, you're a little bit older than when you woke up this morning. Your telomeres are slightly shorter.
Your DNA has a few more mutations. Your proteins have a bit more damage. It's happening right now, invisibly, inexorably. But you're still here, still functional, still capable of sleep, of repair, of holding off entropy for another day. Aging is not optional, but living well while aging is. And understanding what's happening, understanding the biology behind the decline, that gives you some small measure of control. But of course, sometimes aging is interrupted violently. Let's talk about trauma. Your body is designed to handle damage. Evolution has refined repair mechanisms over millions of years, systems that can respond to injury, seal wounds, fight infections, rebuild tissue. But there are limits. When trauma is severe enough, when the damage comes fast enough, your body's repair systems can be overwhelmed. And sometimes the body's own response to injury becomes as dangerous as the injury itself. Let's talk about what happens when your body is traumatically injured and the cascade of biological events that follows. When you're injured, when blood vessels are torn and you start bleeding, your body launches an immediate response. Within seconds of injury, platelets, tiny cell fragments circulating in your blood, detect the damage. They're triggered by exposure to collagen, a protein normally hidden inside blood vessel walls. When a vessel is torn, collagen is exposed, and platelets rush to the site. They become activated, changing shape, becoming sticky, adhering to the damaged vessel wall and to each other. They form a temporary plug, a first line of defense against blood loss. But platelets alone aren't enough. The plug is fragile, easily dislodged. So your body activates the coagulation cascade, a series of chemical reactions involving more than a dozen clotting factors, proteins in your blood that exist in inactive forms until needed. When activated, each clotting factor activates the next in sequence, amplifying the signal exponentially. The final step produces thrombin, an enzyme that converts fibrinogen, a soluble blood protein, into fibrin, long strands that form a mesh over the platelet plug. This mesh traps more platelets and red blood cells, forming a stable clot that seals the wound. This whole process, from injury to stable clot, takes about 5 to 10 minutes if everything works correctly. But if you've lost too much blood, if major vessels are severed, clotting can't keep up with blood loss. Your blood volume drops, your blood pressure falls, and you enter hypovolemic shock. Your heart beats faster, trying to circulate what little blood remains. Your blood vessels constrict, redirecting blood to vital organs. Your skin becomes pale, cold, clammy. You feel dizzy, weak, confused as your brain gets less oxygen. Without rapid intervention, transfusion, and surgical repair, you'll lose consciousness and die. But bleeding isn't the only danger in severe trauma. There's also compartment syndrome, a condition that happens when pressure builds up inside a closed muscle compartment. Your muscles are grouped into compartments, enclosed by tough connective tissue called fascia. If there's bleeding or swelling inside a compartment, the pressure increases, but the fascia doesn't stretch. The pressure compresses blood vessels, cutting off blood supply to the muscle and nerves inside. Muscle tissue starts to die from lack of oxygen. Nerves are damaged, causing excruciating pain, then numbness as they fail. If compartment syndrome isn't treated immediately, within hours, the muscle tissue dies completely. And when muscle dies, it releases toxic contents into the bloodstream. Potassium, myoglobin, phosphate. This is rhabdomyolysis, the breakdown of muscle tissue. Myoglobin, a protein that stores oxygen in muscle, is toxic to kidneys. It gets filtered out but clogs the kidney tubules, causing acute kidney failure. You can survive the initial trauma, survive the blood loss, and then die days later from kidney failure caused by your own dead muscle tissue. Burns present their own unique set of problems. The severity of a burn is classified by depth. First-degree burns damage only the outer layer of skin, the epidermis. They're painful, red, but they heal without scarring. Second-degree burns extend into the dermis, the deeper skin layer. They blister. They're extremely painful because nerve endings are exposed and irritated, and they take weeks to heal, sometimes leaving scars. Third-degree burns destroy the entire thickness of skin, sometimes extending into fat, muscle, or bone. Paradoxically, they're often less painful initially because the nerve endings have been destroyed. But severe burns are about more than just skin damage. Skin is your body's primary barrier against water loss and infection. When large areas are burned, you lose massive amounts of fluid through the damaged tissue. Plasma leaks out of blood vessels and evaporates from the burn surface. You can lose liters of fluid in hours, leading to hypovolemic shock even without bleeding. Burn victims require aggressive fluid resuscitation, gallons of intravenous fluids to replace what's lost, carefully calculated based on burn size and depth. And then there's infection risk. Burned skin can't protect against bacteria. The dead tissue becomes a breeding ground for pathogens. Pseudomonas, Staphylococcus, fungi, they colonize burn wounds and invade deeper. Burn infections are notoriously difficult to treat because the destroyed blood vessels can't deliver antibiotics to the tissue. Some burn victims die not from the burn itself, but from sepsis, overwhelming bloodstream infection that their damaged body can't fight. Head trauma is particularly concerning because the brain, unlike most tissues, can't regenerate neurons. When brain cells die, they're gone. A concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury where the brain is shaken inside the skull, causing temporary dysfunction. You might lose consciousness briefly, feel confused, have memory problems. Most concussions resolve within days to weeks, but even mild head injuries can have lasting effects, especially with repeated trauma. Athletes who suffer multiple concussions show increased rates of depression, cognitive decline, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a progressive, degenerative disease. Severe traumatic brain injuries cause physical damage to brain tissue. Bleeding inside the skull, either in the brain itself or between the brain and skull, creates pressure. But the skull is rigid. It can't expand. As pressure builds, it compresses the brain, cutting off blood flow, causing more damage. Brain tissue herniates, gets pushed through openings in the skull or pushed down toward the spine. Without emergency surgery to relieve the pressure, the brain is crushed from within. And trauma doesn't just affect the body, it affects the mind. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a biological condition triggered by experiencing or witnessing severe trauma. It's not weakness, not inability to cope, it's your brain's fear and memory systems becoming dysregulated. The amygdala, which processes fear and threat, becomes hyperactive. The hippocampus, which handles memory context, becomes impaired. The prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotional responses, shows decreased activity. People with PTSD experience intrusive memories, flashbacks, where they relive the trauma with full emotional and physiological intensity. Their nervous system remains in a heightened state of arousal, constantly scanning for threats. Loud noises, certain smells, anything that resembles the original trauma can trigger a full panic response, and sleep becomes nearly impossible. Nightmares replay the trauma. Hyperarousal prevents falling asleep. Fear of nightmares makes people avoid sleep entirely. The exhaustion compounds the emotional dysregulation, creating another vicious cycle. Your body can heal from remarkable trauma. Bones knit back together, becoming stronger at the fracture site than they were before. Skin regenerates, though scarred. Internal organs can recover function if the damage isn't too extensive. But the healing takes time, energy, resources. Your body diverts energy from normal maintenance to repair. You feel tired, you need more sleep. Your immune system works overtime to prevent infection and clear damaged tissue. And some damage never fully heals. Scar tissue replaces normal tissue but lacks its full function. Nerves may not regenerate correctly, leaving numbness or chronic pain. Brain injuries leave permanent deficits. And severe trauma changes you psychologically. Even after your body heals, the memory remains. Your brain has learned that the world is dangerous, that catastrophic injury can happen suddenly without warning. That lesson doesn't fade easily. Some trauma survivors develop a protective hypervigilance, constantly assessing threats. Others develop avoidance, refusing to engage in activities or visit places that remind them of the trauma. The body heals, but the mind holds on. So as you lie here tonight, safe in bed, uninjured, your body quietly maintaining itself through normal wear and tear, remember that this peace is not guaranteed. Trauma can strike anyone, anytime, without warning. Your body has systems to respond, to clot blood, to fight infection, to repair damage. But those systems have limits. They can be overwhelmed. And when they are, survival depends on how quickly you get help, how severe the damage is, and sometimes just luck. Your body is resilient but also fragile, capable of healing but also vulnerable to injury that surpasses its capacity to recover. But whether through trauma or through time, every body eventually reaches the same end. Let's bring this all together. So here we are, 3 hours later, having explored the disturbing biology that makes you human. The parasites living on your face, the cells eating themselves to survive, the bacteria outnumbering your own cells, the inevitable decay waiting at the end. We've talked about birth and death, about disease and healing, about pain and sleep, and all the ways your body can fail or be damaged. And if you're still awake, if you've made it this far, you might be lying there wondering why any of this matters. Why spend hours thinking about biology's darker corners when you're just trying to fall asleep? Here's the thing. Understanding what's happening inside your body, even the disturbing parts, especially the disturbing parts, changes how you see yourself. You're not a static thing. You're not a finished product. You're a process, a continuous biological event that started at conception and won't end until your last breath. Every moment, your cells are dividing, dying, repairing damage, fighting infections, clearing waste. You are always being made and unmade simultaneously. The you that existed when this video started is already slightly different from the you listening now. And there's something oddly comforting about that. Yes, your body is temporary. Yes, it's vulnerable to parasites and disease and injury and the slow accumulation of damage we call aging, but it's also remarkably resilient. It can heal from wounds, fight off infections, adapt to stress, survive conditions that should kill it. Your immune system is constantly patrolling, destroying abnormal cells before they become cancer. Your DNA repair mechanisms are fixing mutations. Your autophagy is clearing cellular debris. All of this is happening right now, without your conscious input, without you even knowing about it. You're not in control of most of what your body does. You can't will your immune system to fight harder, can't consciously direct your cells to divide or your neurons to fire. Your body runs on ancient programs, evolutionary strategies refined over billions of years, and those programs are good at what they do. They've kept your ancestors alive through ice ages and plagues and famines. They've survived everything evolution threw at them, or you wouldn't be here. You are the product of an unbroken chain of survival stretching back to the first living cells. But you're also mortal, finite. Your telomeres are shortening, your proteins are accumulating damage, your mitochondria are wearing out. Someday, likely decades from now if you're young, maybe sooner if you're not, your body will fail. Your heart will stop, your brain will go silent, and the bacteria that lived peacefully in your gut will spread through your tissues and begin breaking you down. You'll return to the ecosystem, your atoms recycled into soil and plants and other organisms. Nothing about you will be lost, just transformed, redistributed, part of the endless cycle of matter and energy. And that's not morbid, it's just biology. Death isn't a failure, it's the price of having been alive. Every organism that's ever existed has died or will die. It's universal, and in a strange way, it's what makes life precious. If you had infinite time, nothing would matter. But you don't. You have decades, maybe a century if you're very lucky. And that finitude gives weight to how you spend those years, what you do with this temporary collection of cells and consciousness. We talked about sleep, about how your brain needs it to function, to clear waste, to consolidate memories. Every night you sleep is a small act of maintenance, your body taking care of itself, preparing for another day. And if you've been lying here for 3 hours listening to disturbing biology, there's a good chance you're tired now. Your adenosine levels have been building all day, that chemical signal of sleep pressure accumulating in your brain. Your circadian rhythm is telling you it's time to rest. Your body wants to sleep, needs to sleep, and maybe now, having thought about cellular processes and disease mechanisms and the strange machinery of life, you're ready to let go of consciousness for a while. Because sleep is trust. It's trusting your body to keep functioning while you're not aware, trusting your heart to keep beating, your lungs to keep breathing, your immune system to keep patrolling. You surrender control, you close your eyes, and you let your biology take over. And your biology is good at this. It's been doing it every night of your life. It knows how to maintain you, how to repair you, how to prepare you for tomorrow. You don't have to manage it, you just have to let it happen. So if you found this interesting, if 3 hours of biological horror somehow made good bedtime listening, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you want more content like this, more deep dives into the weird science that explains why you are the way you are. Leave a comment telling me which part was most disturbing or most fascinating, or which kept you awake when you should have been asleep. I read them all, and I'm genuinely curious what resonates with people, what makes them think, what makes them uncomfortable in that good way where you learn something you can't unlearn. Share this with someone who likes biology, or someone who has trouble sleeping, or someone who just appreciates knowing how things work even when those things are slightly horrifying. We're all walking biological experiments, temporary arrangements of matter that somehow became conscious, and there's something beautiful about understanding the mechanisms, even the disturbing ones. especially the disturbing ones, because those are often the most important, the most revealing of what we actually are beneath the illusion of control and permanence. And remember, everything we talked about tonight, every disturbing fact, every uncomfortable truth, it's all normal. You're supposed to have mites on your face. Your cells are supposed to eat themselves. You're supposed to be more bacteria than human. Your immune system is supposed to occasionally make mistakes. Your proteins are supposed to accumulate damage. This is not a failure of your body. This is your body working exactly as evolution designed it. You're a biological organism on a planet full of biological organisms, and you're subject to the same rules as everything else that's alive. The disturbing biology isn't an aberration, it's the foundation. Life is strange and messy and complicated and often deeply weird when you look closely, but it's also elegant, efficient, and surprisingly robust. You're surviving right now, in this moment, because trillions of cells are cooperating, because ancient biochemical pathways are functioning, because your body knows what to do, even when you don't. And tonight, as you finally drift off, as your consciousness fades and sleep takes over, your body will keep working. It will clear the metabolic waste from your brain, consolidate your memories of disturbing biology, repair cellular damage, and prepare you to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. Sleep well, knowing that while you rest, your body is doing 1,000 disturbing things to keep you alive. Your cells are dividing and dying. Your immune system is hunting abnormal cells. Your gut bacteria are fermenting your dinner. Your neurons are pruning unnecessary connections. It's all happening beneath your awareness, in the dark, in the silence, in that mysterious state between consciousness and oblivion that we call sleep. You're not in control. You never were. But that's okay. Your biology has this. It's been doing this for billions of years. Trust it. Let go and rest. We started this journey 3 hours ago with a simple idea. You're not alone. Even in an empty room, even in the dark, even when you think you're just lying there trying to sleep, you're surrounded by life. Mites on your face, bacteria in your gut, viruses in your bloodstream, all of them living their own microscopic existences inside and on you. And we've spent these hours exploring what that means, what it means to be a biological organism, temporary and vulnerable and deeply, beautifully strange. We talked about parasites that can change your behavior, about cells that eat themselves to survive, about the fact that you're technically more bacterial cells than human ones. We explored how your body decomposes after death, how fetal development goes through stages that look like other species, how cancer is just your own cells forgetting the rules. We discussed starvation and obesity, autoimmunity and prions, the strange biology of sleep itself, and the reality that pain and trauma and aging are all just part of being alive. And if that sounds depressing, if 3 hours of disturbing biology has left you feeling small or fragile or too aware of your own mortality, I want you to reframe it, because yes, you're mortal. Yes, your body will eventually fail. Yes, you're vulnerable to disease and injury and the slow accumulation of damage, but you're also here, right now, despite everything, despite the parasites and the mutations and the toxic proteins and the autoimmune mistakes and the entropy slowly pulling you apart. You're alive. Your heart is beating. Your lungs are breathing. Your brain is processing these words and making meaning from them. That's not a small thing. That's extraordinary. You are a collection of approximately 37 trillion cells, all working together, all following chemical signals and genetic instructions to keep you functional. You're a walking ecosystem, a mobile habitat for countless other organisms, a temporary arrangement of atoms that somehow became conscious and decided to spend 3 hours learning about its own biology. The odds of you existing at all, of this specific combination of genes and experiences and consciousness, are so vanishingly small that it's almost miraculous. And yet here you are. We talked a lot about sleep tonight because sleep is fundamental to everything else we discussed. It's when your brain clears the toxic proteins that could lead to neurodegeneration. It's when your immune system works hardest to fight infections and destroy abnormal cells. It's when your body repairs tissue damage, consolidates memories, regulates hormones that control hunger and metabolism. Sleep is not a luxury. It's not wasted time. It's when your body does some of its most important maintenance, when it protects you from the very problems we've been discussing. Chronic sleep deprivation increases your risk of almost everything we talked about: obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, weakened immunity, chronic inflammation. When you don't sleep enough, you're preventing your body from defending itself, from repairing damage, from clearing waste. You're essentially sabotaging all those ancient biological programs that are trying to keep you alive. And the cruel irony is that stress about not sleeping, anxiety about health, worrying about all the things that could go wrong, those make sleep even harder to achieve. So maybe this knowledge, this understanding of what your body is doing while you sleep, can help you relax into it. You don't have to consciously manage your cellular metabolism or direct your immune system or manually clear beta amyloid from your brain. Your body knows how to do all of that. It's been doing it every night of your life. You just have to give it the time and the conditions it needs. Darkness, quiet, comfort, and permission to shut down your conscious mind for a while. That's all sleep requires. Trust in your biology and the willingness to let go of control. And if you're still awake after 3 hours of this, if your mind is racing with thoughts about telomeres and prions and mites and decomposition, that's okay too. Sometimes learning disturbing things keeps us awake precisely because it's disturbing, because it challenges how we think about ourselves and our bodies. But eventually, your adenosine levels will win. Your sleep pressure will overwhelm your conscious resistance. Your eyes will close, your muscles will relax, and you'll drift into that strange state where your conscious mind shuts down, but your biology keeps working. Tonight, or whenever you finally sleep, your neurons will fire in slow, synchronized waves. Your glymphatic system will activate, flushing cerebrospinal fluid through your brain tissue. Your immune system will ramp up its activity, sending more white blood cells patrolling through your bloodstream. Your growth hormone levels will rise, stimulating tissue repair. Your body will do exactly what it's supposed to do, what it evolved to do over billions of years. It will maintain you, protect you, prepare you for another day of being alive. And when you wake up, you'll be slightly different. Some of your cells will have divided, some will have died and been cleared away. Your memories from today will have been consolidated, integrated into your long-term storage. Your body will have cleared metabolic waste, repaired minor damage, reset hormone levels. You'll be a slightly newer version of yourself, rebuilt overnight by processes you can't see or feel, but that are absolutely essential to your continued existence. This is what your body does. This is what you are. a constant process of destruction and renewal, death and life happening simultaneously, is less than #0. 7 is greater than. We are all temporary. Every person who has ever lived has died or will die. Every cell in your body will eventually be replaced or destroyed. Every atom that currently makes up your physical form will eventually be part of something else, someone else, scattered across the ecosystem. Nothing about you is permanent except the fact that you existed, that you were here, that you were conscious and aware and part of the universe experiencing itself. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it has to be enough because it's all any of us get. But while you're here, while your cells are still cooperating and your heart is still beating and your brain is still generating thoughts, you might as well understand what's happening. You might as well know about the mites and the bacteria and the autophagy and the telomeres. Not because it will change anything fundamental about your mortality, but because understanding is its own kind of power. It's a way of making peace with biology, with the fact that you're an animal, a mammal, a temporary arrangement of cooperating cells that will someday stop cooperating. So, thank you for spending these 3 hours with me, exploring the disturbing biology that makes you human. Thank you for being curious enough to learn, brave enough to listen, and patient enough to hear about prions and decomposition and all the ways your body can fail. If you made it this far, if you're still listening, go ahead and like this video. Subscribe if you want more content that explores the weird intersection of biology and existence. Comment and tell me what surprised you most, what disturbed you most, or what made you think differently about your own body. Share this with someone who likes biology, or someone who has trouble sleeping, or someone who appreciates understanding how things work even when those things are uncomfortable. We're all in this together, all temporary biological organisms trying to make sense of our own existence, all wondering why we're here and what it means to be alive. And sometimes, learning the disturbing details, understanding the mechanisms, makes it all feel a little less frightening. Not because biology is comforting, but because knowledge is. Before you go, before you close your eyes and let sleep take you, I want you to think about one thing. Right now, at this very moment, your body is performing millions of chemical reactions per second. Your cells are communicating, your proteins are folding, your DNA is being read and transcribed. You are an impossibly complex biological machine that somehow produces consciousness, that somehow creates the experience of being you. And all of that complexity, all of that biology, exists in service of one goal, keeping you alive long enough to experience this moment. So, experience it. Feel your heartbeat. Notice your breath. Sense the weight of your body against the bed. You are alive, right now. Despite the mites and the mutations and the entropy, you are here. And your body, this strange and disturbing and beautiful collection of cells and bacteria and biological processes, your body is working to keep you here, to give you one more day, one more night, one more chance to be conscious and aware. That's what all this disturbing biology is for. Not to frighten you, but to sustain you. Not to harm you, but to keep you alive as long as possible in a universe that tends toward death. Sleep well tonight, or don't sleep. Either way, your biology will continue doing what it does, maintaining you, protecting you, slowly accumulating damage, but also constantly repairing it. You're not in control of most of it, and that's okay. You were never supposed to be. You're just along for the ride, a passenger in a vehicle that's been driving itself for billions of years. Trust it, let go, and remember you're never truly alone. You're a walking ecosystem, a civilization of cells, a temporary arrangement of matter that somehow became aware of itself. And that's the most disturbing and most beautiful truth of all.